Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome today's MC, RPAG's Vice President, Jesse Taylor.
Hello, good morning. Welcome back to day 2 of Forward 2021, the RPAG National Conference. Amazing night last night, great energy here in the room. Awesome dinner last night. I mean, you can't beat the sunset over Salt Creek Beach at the Dana Lawn at the Ritz-Carlton Laguna Niguel. That's why we come back here every year. That's why many of you come back here every single year. And first and foremost on that, thank you to our partners. We wouldn't be able to hold this event, have those beautiful dinners, have great events tonight if it weren't for them. But it's not just the event. They have amazing content. Last night when I shared about going above the line and bringing unique ideas and solutions that go above and beyond the typical advisor, these are the folks who are going to help you get there. They have the great information, great content, and amazing solutions that are going to help you there. Many of you work with a lot of these firms. If there's someone that you're not as familiar with, go reach out to them. Ask them what they're all about. They're fantastic. If they're a partner of RPAG, that means they're committed to you and committed to your growth. So thank you, and a round of applause for our partners. Got a couple of housekeeping items before we start the day today. So let's talk. We have a overview again of our schedule. We just had breakfast. We got main stage in here till about noon. Lunch out in the courtyard again, and then this afternoon we go to breakout sessions. So breakout sessions, check the app, pick and build your agenda. There's going to be sessions here in the main ballroom, as well as 2 breakouts in Pacific Promenade, which is across the courtyard, over the river, through the woods, and across the lawn to PAC Prom. But check the map on the app, follow your other peers out there if you're gonna pick one of those sessions. A lot of great stuff. Little change of agenda. We're doing the happy hour along with the evening event, the backyard barbecue at 4:30. Not doing the partner session across. But today's main stage, starting right up, ERISA update, investment hot topics, financial wellness, realtors approach to target date funds. Don't want to miss that one after the break. And then a couple amazing panels with your RPAG advisors, as well as some outside experts on diversity and inclusion. So a lot of great content. This afternoon, really good sessions. You're going to be hearing about ESG, guaranteed income, sales and marketing practice management, 457 plans, women in retirement, wealth care, and much, much more. So a lot of really great breakout sessions to pick from. And before we begin the day, when we were thinking about forward and thinking about the theme about, hey, how do we push forward? Well, how do we look forward to the future? Given everything that transpired the last 2 years, we asked some of your RPAG member peers about how they are pushing forward. And we have a nice little video for that.
The pandemic for us, the permanent changes that we have noticed within our organization and team is first and foremost was to be more collaborative with outside resources, with providers, with DCIOs and trusted partners that we work with.
So we're very grateful to be where we're at today. We frankly had our best year ever the last 18 months, which is just shocking because in many cases we didn't set foot in an office. But we really tried to keep our people and our clients front and center, obviously leveraging digital technology and the RPAG platform to help get us through, and we're excited to hopefully, knock on wood, be coming out on the other side better for it.
Another important thing that was helpful to us was relying on the RPAG WellSense program. Last August 2020, we decided to adopt that and present that because there's a nice technology platform to help engage participants, knowing that this COVID process has created financial hardship with family members going on furlough, layoffs, and other medical challenges they may be facing through this time.
The best piece of advice, well, I think that you need to move your cheese. So if those people who read the book know moving the cheese, sometimes you have to move your own cheese. Don't let somebody else move your cheese and you figure out what happened and try to do the same thing you've always done. Sometimes you've got to move it yourself to keep fresh and keep up to speed on what's happening we could have been doing these Zooms long ago, but a lot of us were pushing it off. So I think that's really important to keep up with all the advisors out there. If you're not going to do it, somebody else is.
To stand out, you have to be a thought leader and a consultant. That is not an option these days, in this day and age. The industry has changed so much where you cannot just be a business advisor on a retirement plan.
Then talking to my team, they really leverage the support group at RPAG as well, just to help navigate the technology, understanding what new resources are available that we could share with our clients.
RPAG is one partner that provides us with that thought capital, the seminars, the webinars and such, really keeping us in the loop with what's changing, because it's changing quick and fast, so keeping us on top of that.
As I've thought about how has RPAG helped us be successful, I'll kind of reflect back a couple years, and we were having some conversations internally, just like, hey, at some point, do we ever get to a size where we try and build our own mousetrap, right, in terms of the infrastructure? And I can say with confidence today that just frankly, even in the last couple of years with some of the new, the Flex Path and the custom CATs, those have become so integral to our business and winning new plans that I think it's sort of a resounding no, we would never do that, just because we're seeing so much value from the resources. Again, whether it's the investment side, which we're never going to have that purchasing power. Simple things, right? Like the stable value analyzer, the target date fund analyzer. Those are all things that we're finding tremendous value in and are seeing some success winning new plans and retaining them as well.
It goes beyond just a successful, fully funded retirement. It really includes the entire journey from when they start or you help them start that journey to when they're successfully retired, which encompasses financial wellness, budgeting, financial planning, college funding for their children, for example, planning for future healthcare and Medicare needs.
This is a primary reason I look forward to the RPAG Annual Conference, to connect with the vendors, learn about new ideas, and also develop our knowledge about ESG and cybersecurity, which are hot topics in our industry.
Don't stay status quo. Challenge it. Leverage what RPAG has to offer and lean on their expertise and the deep bench that they have of experience and knowledge, and bring that to bear on your practice.
It's challenging to keep up with, and it is huge to have a partner in your corner like RPAG. It just makes a big difference. I don't have to be looking for information, they're bringing it to me, which saves a lot of my energy.
Our roles morphed from that of a business advisor to that of a trusted business consultant to our clients. All these aspects need to be brought into the mix so that you're educating them and helping them grow while they're on the journey, so that they can retire successfully and not have to seek that education at retirement. They get chills when they see you retire successfully because you've helped them along the journey, and that's what it's all about.
And now please welcome to the stage RPAG's ERISA team, Joel Shapiro, Tom Baston, and John Nelson.
Good morning. Lucky you get to start your morning with ERISA. I know that you guys are all so excited about that. I mean, who doesn't wake up and crack open the code or ERISA or the regs every single morning? I want to start off with a couple of thank yous real quickly. The first one is to Jesse for his presentation yesterday. He showed some photos from last year's virtual conference, and I'd like to thank him for doing so because it proves that I do wear pants when I'm doing virtual meetings. I'd also like to thank the two gentlemen on either side of me. So you hear often folks refer to Ask Joel, but the truth is when you're asking RPAG questions, you're really asking the three of us. So Tom on my left and John on my right, they are on both coasts, which helps us from a time perspective. And at the end of the day, you have a real depth of knowledge and experience with these two gentlemen. So thank you both for all that you do for everybody that's in this room. We're going to talk a little bit about a lot today, and that's why I've referenced this as the ERISA Dagwood sandwich. And it occurred to me when our younger folks that help us with all the graphics, raise their eyebrows that some people might be too young to know what a Dagwood sandwich is. So real quickly, it was a cartoon strip that back in the day, this gentleman used to like to make sandwiches. And a Dagwood sandwich was basically throwing everything in it. So we're going to cover a bunch of different topics. I would characterize the ones that I'm going to cover as being kind of the condiments and maybe, a pickle here or a tomato there. And then the two gentlemen on either side of me are going to kind of be the meat and cheese. They've got some really robust topics that I think that our membership really needs to know and understand. And we're also going to talk about how we're going to help you as a result of these new kind of developments in the industry. So with that, I'm going to dive in and talk a little bit and give you guys a litigation update. And I picked out just a few cases for some elements that I think are important for you to take away as advisors. Some of it is important in terms of how you're going to talk to your clients, and some of it I think is going to be important in regards to your own practices. So the first one, NYU. This one is a 403B case that's been going on for quite a while, right? And this was a scenario that's eventually the defendants have won, and it's been appealed a number of times. And in this particular case, there was a 2-1 split by the Second Circuit. And basically what they came down to was that while the plaintiffs bear the burden of proof that there is a loss that occurred, once they've done so, the burden shifts over to the defendants. So that's to the fiduciaries to prove that that loss wasn't driven by the breach of duty. So that's an important aspect, I think, for clients to understand is it's not going to be a scenario where they get to sit back and just watch the plaintiffs try to prove their case against them. At some point, if they've proven a loss, it's going to flip and they're going to have to come forward and proactively defend themselves. And this is becoming more prevalent. As you see, this aligns with the 1st, 4th, 5th, and 8th circuits. So it's growing in nature. And it's not unless and until we see some split in the circuits that it would actually make its way to the Supreme Court. So as of now, I would venture to guess that that's going to stand. In addition, the court explicitly made the comment that it's important to name the individual fiduciaries in these cases. Now, there haven't been a whole lot in the way of recovery in terms of dollars against individuals. That's typically been, the committee or the plan sponsor. But the reason that the court said that they had to name the individuals was in order to bar them from serving as fiduciaries in the future. So I think that that's an important takeaway for clients as well, because a lot of them end up worrying, my personal assets are at stake. And from a pure legal perspective, that's certainly true. We just haven't seen it play out that frequently. But I don't think we're going to see them let off the hook in the future because that's not where the money lies. And then finally, and I think that this is an important aspect here too, in the underlying court, the judge called out the fiduciaries. Essentially, the judge said, man, these fiduciaries stunk. I mean, they said that they didn't understand all of the financial aspects of the plan, that they didn't understand the importance of their role as a fiduciary, and still they prevailed. So the good news is even in a worst case scenario where you have fiduciaries that are maybe less than stellar, if the facts are still good, and the facts are still good usually because of what you're doing with them, that there's a good likelihood that they prevail. Of course, no one wants to go to court in the first place. Moving on to the next case, so the Banner Health. This was a settlement, and the 10th Circuit upheld some of the aspects that were actually adjudicated, but I think the settlement here is important from a couple of aspects too. So the settlement was for $3.1 million. Originally, they asked for about $86 million in damages. When the attorneys moved for their fees, the court said it's not enough to prevail. You have to actually show that you prevailed on the merits. And it's not that you prevailed in a trivial manner or based on a procedural victory. You have to have actually done something as the attorney to get the fee. And so they kind of slapped the attorneys around a little bit in this case because they said you went from 86 million to 3 million. How much should I really award you? And they talked about going all the way down to like $200,000, which, as you can guess, probably wasn't going to be real happy news for the attorneys. They ended up eventually awarding them $1 million, but in so doing, they said that it was completely excessive, the billing practices of the attorneys. And they noted that one attorney had billed 24 hours in one day, that they had $70,000 in travel, and they also knocked the costs down from about $150,000 to about $21,000. And I think the important takeaway from that is, again, from a pragmatic perspective, if that's where the recovery is going for the attorneys, this is going to become a lot less of a juicy morsel for them in the future. Talking real quickly about T. Rowe Price. So this was an excessive fee suit. The allegations contained what has now become very familiar in terms of proprietary investment usage. It's a settlement, and we don't really have a whole lot in the way of details yet on this settlement, but I thought it was interesting that the attorney, each side agreed to cover their own costs, so this was not necessarily a windfall for the attorneys. But the final element here is important because I think it shows an emerging trend from a legal perspective that I think you'd like to pass on to your clients. The judge was skeptical regarding the merits of the case, essentially saying, it looks like plaintiffs' attorneys want us to become policymakers. And that's generally not something that courts want to do, right? They want to adjudicate based on the facts and the law. They don't want to create law. And if that's the case, and judges are starting to become keen to the fact that a lot of this is kind of driving the desire to create, law that plaintiffs can wedge as a weapon against fiduciaries, I think we're going to see a lot more reticence on the part of courts to make these rulings. The Great West case, so you guys are probably familiar with this one as well. This was a resounding victory for the defendants. This was a scenario where the plaintiffs lost an excessive fee case. It was actually dismissed. So in other words, the judge said, there's no merits. They threw it out. And they went so far as to fine and sanction the attorneys that brought the case, noting that it was really plaintiff-driven litigation. In this case, the court ruled that the plaintiffs really made no effort to prove that the compensation was unreasonable in scope for the services that were being provided. And so I think that that's always an important element to remember, that we never really look at fees in a vacuum, that it's always going to be tied to services. And if the services warrant the fee, even if it's a high fee, it's appropriate. And so I think that that's a good message for your clients. If they find themselves after benchmarking that they're at the high end of the range, even if they're in the range, it can still be reasonable if they're getting a high level of service. Talking real quickly about the PNC case, again, alleged excessive administrative and record-keeping fees. This was a scenario where the court ruled that the plaintiff's allegations stopped just short of crossing the threshold from possible to probable in terms of it being a breach. And the key takeaway here is plaintiffs have to do more than just identify that there's a potential conflict of interest. And this was a scenario where there was use of proprietary investments. It wasn't enough just to say that there could be a conflict of interest. They had to prove that there was an actual loss that was somehow tied to that. And I think that a lot of times our clients get tied up a little bit with looking for conflicts of interest without understanding that there has to be that pragmatic next step of, okay, is there a conflict, and did that conflict actually result in any loss to the plan? The next case, Cornell, so another one of the 403B cases. I raised this one because I thought it was interesting that they received some support from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and ABC, and they basically, along the same lines as what I was just talking about, stated it's not enough just to claim that there was a breach and then wait for there to be a market drop so that there was, quote, a loss. They have to be connected to each other. Essentially, what these amicus briefs were stating to the court was, we're worried that plaintiffs' counsel are going to kind of build claims based on a procedural breach and then just wait for the market to drop so that they can have some loss, almost like there's an objective presumption that the breach caused the loss. And so, this I think will be a very important case to see how it unwinds due to the fact that these arguments are being made, and it has a material impact on how your plans should look at a breach, right? Obviously, we always want to correct any breach, but some breaches are worse than other breaches. Some breaches have an actual loss, and some just require some procedural changes. It's important for them to keep that kind of concept. Cryptocurrency. So yesterday you heard Vince talk a little bit about cryptocurrency. I'm just curious, real quickly, raise of hands, how many of you have had at least one client raise the concept of cryptocurrency in their plan? Okay, that's a pretty substantial number of hands, and I guarantee you that that's going to go up. There's going to be more hands going up. Now, I'm not telling you that that's a great idea. In fact, what I'm telling you is, when you think about what the DOL said, might not be such a great idea right now. And I think it's important to understand, where they're coming from. So I'm going to actually read 2 quotes. This is from the Acting Assistant Secretary for the EBSA. Quote, "When you look at cryptocurrency and the different forms of currency, there is a lot of volatility, there's a lot of noise, there's very little transparency." Sounds like he's in favor, right? "And I'm sure some of you have seen reports about cryptocurrency becoming an option in investment lineups, but it's something we find very troubling." Very troubling are 2 really big words coming out of the EBSA, which is the enforcement wing of the Department of Labor. The second quote, "I do think we feel a need ultimately to say something on this because it is a pretty troubling development." Again, he said troubling twice now. "For these investments to be held in tax-advantaged retirement accounts." And he said that basically we should expect some guidance from the EBSA in the next year. So this is one of those scenarios where if you have clients pushing for it, I would break out these quotes and I would make sure that they understand that if they want to explore it, it might be one of those kind of hurry up and wait type scenarios where they might want to wait to see what the enforcement wing of the Department of Labor is going to say about it. In addition, ESG, I've been talking about ESG since I've been, let's say 1994, so that's the year before I even started practicing law. And it's been a roller coaster from a regulatory perspective. And as you're all aware, a client can come to you and say, "I want an ESG fund," but it's never that simple. There is so much involved with it. I was hopeful that we would get more clarification. The Department of Labor had said that they were going to put out additional guidance, and they had kind of targeted September. So I guarantee you, based on past conferences, I'm sure that they're going to release that today. What we're waiting to hear is, what is the current administration going to do with it? Because we know that the prior administration had put out a set of regs that was going to make it a lot more difficult for fiduciaries to kind of jump through hoops to put ESG into plans. And then the current administration said, no, we're going to put a hold on those regs. So the good news is when it comes out, we're obviously going to provide you with all the information that you need to help your clients navigate that. We're going to help you in terms of how you're going to navigate it, because you're going to have to A, educate them, so we're going to provide you with materials for that, and B, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate them. So if you're talking about scores or you're talking about specific types of SRI, we're going to have both technology as well as investment research that's going to be at your fingertips for that, and then ultimately be able to deliver it to clients. So that is my portion of it. I'm going to turn it over to John. John's going to dive into Prohibited Transaction Exemption 2020-02, and the key word here really is rollover. So, this is talking about the fiduciary rule. So, John, it's yours.
Yes, great, thanks. So just as a show of hands, so what I'm going to talk about right now are IRA rollovers. Who out there is doing IRA rollover business? Okay, lots of hands. So if you are, pay attention. We're going to talk about what you're going to have to do going forward, as well as what you need to be doing right now. So, let me start with some background. So here's a quote: "The decision to roll over assets from a plan to an IRA is often the single most important decision a plan participant makes, involving a lifetime of retirement savings." Now, that's not a quote from me. That's a quote from the Department of Labor as part of the preamble to the prohibited transaction exemption they issued last year. The Department of Labor is very concerned about this whole concept of conflicted advice. Financial service providers have an economic incentive to recommend that retirement investors roll assets into one of the provider's IRAs. The new class exemption allows investment advice fiduciaries to receive compensation as a result of recommendations to roll assets out of the plan. Now, the effective date on this, the prohibited transaction was issued last July. It became effective February 16th, 2021. Now, there's a transition period, though, through December 20th of this year. What you need to be doing right now is comply with what's called the impartial conduct standards, and then the full brunt of the exemption will take effect beginning in December. So rollover recommendations are considered investment advice if the 5-part fiduciary investment advice standards met. The 5-part investment standard I'll talk about in a moment, that was issued back in 1975. But what's clear now is the concept that if you're providing advice to roll assets out of a plan into an IRA, that is considered fiduciary investment advice under ERISA. And if you're receiving compensation from a third party to give that advice, you have a conflict. That's what the purpose of the exemption is for. Now, what's important is that the Department of Labor announced they will not follow Advisory Opinion 2005-23A, that's the Deseret letter. Now, back in 2005, the Department of Labor said that if you give advice to roll out of the plan into an IRA, that's not considered a fiduciary investment advice with respect to the plan because it's not involving plan assets. So that's off the board now. And the Department of Labor is very clear now that advice to roll out of the plan to an IRA is in fact fiduciary investment advice. The prohibited transaction also attempts to cover rollovers from one IRA to another. Now, I think that's questionable. I don't think the Department of Labor really has regulatory authority over IRA type transactions, but they're trying to take that into account too, so think about that as well. Okay, so here's the 5-part test. Now, what we're talking about here is this is the test to determine whether or not what you're telling your client is in fact investment advice. It's investment advice if you make recommendations regarding investment in securities or other property. It's investment advice if you're providing that consultation on a regular basis. Now, regular basis is distinct from a one-time sales transaction. So, if somebody calls you up on the phone and says, I want to buy an annuity in my IRA, or I want to roll assets into an IRA and buy an annuity, and that's it, that's not a regular basis. So that's the thing to keep in mind. Pursuant to a mutual agreement between you and your client that the advice will serve as, it's not the primary basis now, it's a primary basis. So just one of the factors, and that the advice is individualized. So all 5 factors have to be present. Now, I put up a note here, Interpretive Bulletin 96-1. I don't generally recommend you go back and look at some of this stuff, but I would suggest if you're in the IRA rollover business and you're concerned about providing advice, Google Interpretive Bulletin 96.1, because that was issued back in 1996 when the Department of Labor issued the fiduciary rule revision back in 2015, 2016, which was vacated by the Fifth Circuit, which got us to this point where we're at today. They took away IB 96-1, but it's back now. And I think it's important because 96-1 talks about the distinction between advice versus education. If you're providing education, for example, you're talking about model portfolios, you're talking about hypothetical investors, that's education, that's not advice. But when you start to personalize it, taking into account more than just age, taking into account financial circumstances, taking into account particular investments, when you start to personalize, that becomes advice. So take a look at IB 96-1 for a distinction between education versus advice. All right, so why do we need this prohibited transaction? Once again, the concept is if I'm giving investment advice to roll out of the plan into an IRA, and I'm getting paid by an unrelated third party to provide that advice, I've got a conflict of interest, right? So the exemption allows me to receive that compensation in spite of my conflict of interest. Now, this is pretty good, actually, because if you remember back in 2015, 2014, when this was first being talked about, what the DOL essentially said was, you can't, if you're the advisor on the plan, you can't do IRA rollover business. It's a prohibited transaction. But now what they're saying is through disclosure, you can do it, okay? So the exemption requires the following conditions. So you have to provide the advice with what we call the impartial conduct standard. I'll talk about that in a moment. You have to acknowledge that you're a fiduciary, and you have to acknowledge that status in writing. You have to describe the services you're going to provide in writing. You have to describe the conflicts of interest, all right? So if there are conflicts of interest, if I'm pushing a proprietary product or I'm receiving compensation, I have to describe that, and then I have to document the reasons that the rollover recommendation is in the participant's best interest. Now, the financial institution then also has to adopt policies to make sure that their representatives are complying with these rules. And each year, the financial institution report has to be certified by a senior executive officer. So this is serious stuff. And if you mess up, you're barred from doing this for 10 years. So it's pretty serious stuff. Okay, now let me talk about what you need to be doing right now. Is there a way to go back real quick? Well, anyways, I just want to go back because remember, the exemption applies December 2021. So disclosing material conflicts in writing, acknowledging fiduciary status in writing, those things you don't need to be doing. Thank you. You don't need to be doing those things right now. What you need to be doing right now is the top one, acting in accordance with the impartial conduct standard. Okay, so what do you need to be doing right now in that regard? The impartial conduct standard has three requirements. The first thing is you have to act in the best interest standard. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail, but basically what that means is I have to demonstrate that the advice I'm giving is in my client's best interest. Reasonable compensation. Now this is interesting. In the context of a 401k plan, fees have to be reasonable, but the named fiduciary is responsible for determining whether or not fees are reasonable. In the context of IRA rollover business, you're responsible for demonstrating that your fee is reasonable. So if you're charging more than the next guy, you need to be able to document why that in fact is reasonable. Do not make misleading statements. So in terms of best interest, so best interest focuses on three things primarily: costs, the cost of the plan, the cost of the IRA, range of available investment options, and individual circumstances. Now, how do you determine what the fees are with respect to the plan? Now, if you're the plan advisor, that's pretty easy. You're going to know what the plan-related fees are. But if you're not, what you should do is you should ask your participant client for a copy of the 404A5 participant fee disclosure statement, because that will have all the fees in it. It'll have all the investment options as well. Now, if you can't get that, what the DOL says is you can make certain assumptions, but when you make those assumptions, you have to also disclose to your client what the limits are on those types of assumptions. But I would just advise everybody, get a copy of the fee disclosure. That will tell you what the fees are with respect to the current plan. So here's your checklist. In order to receive compensation on IRA rollover business, are you providing fiduciary investment advice? You are providing if it's on a regular basis, pursuant to a mutual understanding between you and your client, and it's not education, it's advice. So if you're providing advice, provide the advice, acknowledge fiduciary status, describe the services you will provide, describe material conflicts of interest, and then document the reasons. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how you demonstrate that the rollover is in your client's best interest. So here's some factors to consider. First of all, can your client leave his or her money in the plan? Well, generally the answer to that is yes. If the account balance is more than $5,000 in the plan can't force the participant out until normal retirement age or age 62, the later. Compare the range of investment alternatives available under the plan to the range of investment alternatives available under the IRA. Compare fees and expenses under the plan and the IRA, and pay particular attention in the plan if the employer is paying part of those fees. So they may not all be assessed against the participant. If the IRA fees are higher, then you need to be able to document why that's in the best interest of the client to pay those higher fees. What additional benefits justify that? Look at the permitted forms of distribution under the plan. Sometimes the only form of distribution under the plan might be simply a lump sum distribution, whereas an IRA might allow periodic withdrawals, partial withdrawals. That might be a reason to consider the ability to tailor withdrawals to your client's particular income situation. Compare the ability to take penalty-free withdrawals. Now remember, in the plan context, if I terminate employment after age 55 and start withdrawals, I don't have to pay the pre-59.5 penalty. That exception doesn't apply to IRAs. On the other hand, if I'm buying a first-time residence or if I'm paying education expenses, I can take withdrawals from an IRA and not pay the penalty. That exception doesn't apply to qualified plans. Roth conversions. Does the plan allow for an in-plan Roth conversion? It may not. I can do that with an IRA. Take a look at the MRD rules. Remember the MRD rules for a qualified plan. If I'm still working, and I'm not a 5% owner, I don't have to start MRDs in the plan. That exception isn't available to IRAs. Plans offer better protection in terms of creditors than IRAs do. And if there's employer securities involved, I can typically hold those in a plan. It may be difficult if they're not publicly traded to hold those in an IRA. So those are some of the factors that you want to take into account. So the conclusion here is that the prohibited transaction rules prohibit advisors from making rollover recommendations and receiving compensation The exemption provides the ability to do that. Most important, it's very clear now the DOL takes the position that if you're advising a client to roll out of the plan to an IRA, that is fiduciary investment advice. Okay? That's a quick summary. Joel?
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Great job. As you can see, there's a lot more involved. I think that's the first time we've ever had applause like mid-presentation.
You finished on time. That's the most important.
Right, and we're on time, which is amazing.
That's why they're applauding.
As you can see, the comparisons that you have to make to show the best interest is a lot more involved than I think a lot of people realized. Here's the good news. We know that it represents a good deal of a lot of your businesses. And we're always looking to make things easier for you at RPAG. So we are preparing first some templates to allow you to more easily make this comparison. Also, it gives you kind of like a workflow in terms of what you have to gather to put together for it. But we're also working on some technology so that some of this will be within the portal for you in the future, because we recognize that it's not just important for us to help our clients and their participants on the accumulation phase, but it's going to become even more important for us to help them on the backside. You know their companies, you know their plan. In most instances, you know the individual participants. Who better to help them navigate the rest of their financial life than you? And it's going to become more important. More participants are going to be coming to you looking for help, particularly as you roll out things like financial wellness and you broaden your relationship with them. So with that, we're going to move on to the next topic. And again, this one is substantive in nature, and it's cybersecurity. And this is an area that Tom has dove in, I think, deeper than anybody that I've met. I mean, Tom knows the insides and outsides, not only of the rules, but what's going on at each of the different record keepers and TPAs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Joel. All right, let me give you a little bit of background on what's going on with cybersecurity, because it really has become the most immediate issue you need to consider as we move forward. A couple of years ago, the government, in particular the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, recognized that all these cyber breaches were occurring, not just in public companies or private companies, but also government agencies. They had quite a few breaches that made the news. And the GAO, when they looked at ERISA, realized that cybersecurity is not addressed. So you're not going to find any ERISA code sections talking about what to do in the event of a cyber breach or what cyber protocol should be followed. So they went to the Department of Labor and said, you really need to come out with some guidance for plan sponsors and participants on how to react with this new major issue. So with that in mind, when you look at the guidance the DOL has given before, it really is not that voluminous. I mean, this is only the 6th, 7th, and 8th time with these 3 recent releases that they've given us any guidance at all. The first 4 came 16 years ago, and you can see, these first 3 are general topics. So the 4th one had to do with tips for hiring consultants. So before 2005, you didn't really see too many advisor RFPs. After that, they started to really take off. And then in 2013, we had the target date tips, which after the government saw what happened in the 2008 financial crisis, they recognized that there was more to these target date funds than what most people understood, and their conclusion was you really need to consider custom options as well. So that brings us forward to April, when they released these 3 different tip sheets. So the first one has to do with cybersecurity tips for plan sponsors, and it's quite detailed, actually. There are 12 different recommendations they have, and then they give quite a bit of information about those different recommendations. So if you were like me and hoping you could retire before you had to learn all this stuff, forget it, it's here. They actually have started asking these questions in open DOL audits. So immediately after releasing the tips, they went to the audits. Now, this is not law, all right, so these are best practices and standards. But when you look at the language in these tip sheets, you'll see, for instance, responsible plan fiduciaries have an obligation to ensure proper mitigation of cybersecurity risk. Well, they obviously think if you're being responsible, you need to take this into account. Then they also stated the following best practices are for plan fiduciaries making prudent decisions on service providers they should hire. So again, you really need to be considering this. All right, so when we look at tips for hiring a service provider, They did get quite detailed. So they can see there are a lot of questions they want you to ask about security standards, security policies, security practices, audit results. So the good news is you don't have to be a cyber expert, but you do need to understand the questions that should be asked so you can help your clients get that information from the record keepers. And then most likely what you're going to need to do is get the IT department for the client involved so they can look at the answers and make a determination if they're acceptable. So again, you don't have to understand what the answers say. I can promise you, you probably won't, because when you look at some of these security standards, you know, it's a lot of industry jargon that I wasn't familiar with. The important thing here, though, is you want to look for audit results. So in most of these record keepers, they're doing a SOC 2 or SOC 3. They typically include a cyber audit as part of that. And those results are something that come to you on an annual basis right now, actually. But if you're not looking at it and you're just relying on the plan auditor to take a look, you may want to spend a few minutes yourself and go through those results. So you need to understand how the record keeper, and I'm saying record keeper mainly because that's who's holding the money, but these apply to all vendors. So if there are TPAs involved, advisors involved, you could expect that these questions are going to be asked of yourself as well. Now for us as the advisor, you know, we're not touching money typically, so the answers are much easier. We don't have the potential impact that the record keeper and custodian have, but I would still expect to get these questions coming to you from the plan sponsors. So you need to understand the level of security standards that the record keeper's implemented, if they've had any breaches in the past. In fact, if you look at what's come out of the DOL, they expect you to do your own research as the plan sponsor and see if any breaches have happened. So they want you to ask the vendors about those breaches, and they want you to also do your own research and see if they respond and talk about what happened in the instances that you found. And then what's been done to make sure it doesn't happen again. Now when you look at hiring a service provider, the question's going to come up, well, if the account's hacked and money's taken out, do you have insurance? How are you going to cover us to make sure that we don't lose our money? So now you're going to have to become an insurance expert or get the risk management department at your client involved. And if you've ever read insurance policies, you know, they're about 99% of nothing, and you're looking for that 1% that's actually going to protect you. So you're going to need to go in and find out from those insurance carriers, you know, how are we covered? Are we covered for internal breaches? Right now in the industry, most of the cybersecurity breaches are coming from people who work for the record keepers. What about external threats? You know, do we really have coverage here as the plan sponsor, or is the coverage solely for the record keeper? And what does that mean for us versus what does it mean for the record keeper? Here's a little bit deeper information on the type of standards that they're looking for. So when you look at the breaches, they want to know what the process is for notification. You know, how are they going to tell you that a breach exists? What will their process be once that happens? What do you need to do? Are they compliant with all the legal requirements for record retention, destruction, privacy, etc.? So anytime now that you have multiple product sales, which we've seen pop up in some of the litigation, like Vanderbilt, you know, what is participant data versus what is plan data, and who should have access to that? I think the cyber stuff is really going to bring some answers to us as far as how that's going to work. And then, of course, the insurance, which I mentioned. When we look at considerations, we also have in here some plan participant tips, what they think you should do as a participant. And then a lot of this has been incorporated in what the record keeper expects you to do as well. So if you look at your plans, it's always amazing how many people have never logged in. So they have an account, especially when you have auto-enroll plans. That's probably the most negative thing about auto-enrollment, is people just let it happen, money comes out of their paycheck, it goes in, the match goes in, and they never log in, ever. So when you look at the best way to prevent a hack, and every one of the record keepers will tell you that, create a login. So when you look at how people hack into accounts, they steal your personally identifying information, your PII. which if any of you have ever used a credit card, you probably had your PII already stolen. So if you have that, the hackers also know they can go get an IRS 5500. They'll find out where you work, go to the website, EBSA website, determine where your 401k plan is, and then they'll try to go set up an account in your name because you never did it. So participants need to set that account up. In addition, right now, some record keepers require two-factor authentication, but a lot of them don't. So this may be something you want to require because that adds just another level of difficulty for a hacker. So just setting up the login and having two-factor authentication are two major things that can be done to protect participants. So this should be information that you're discussing with the record keepers to find out what their process is, but also that you're telling your clients and they're informing their participants so they can protect their accounts. And then when you want to look at things like background checks, so are the vendors doing those? Because again, right now, most of the threats coming from internal people working there. You know, what is their policy and practice? Do they do them on a regular basis? And then of course the cyber insurance and then the cyber guarantee. So when we started this in April, when these tips got released, I decided for the heck of it to send an email to 17 of the largest record keepers and ask them. And frankly, I kind of expected them all to say yes, but I asked them flat out, if someone steals a participant's money, are you going to put it back in the account? And I was shocked, 3 of them said no. There's no guarantee. The only guarantee they would give is if it was their fault. So if it's not their fault and the money's taken, they're not putting it back in. 6 of them had a blanket guarantee where there was nothing you had to do for that to take place. The other 8 had things you had to do, like create a login, like keep your address current, like report if you've had an identity theft to them, like check your account on a regular basis. And some have defined regular as monthly. So you can spot whether money's come out or not, and then report it to them, and they have a better chance of figuring out who did it to get the money back. So these are all issues and questions that you should know the answers to when you're doing vendor searches and you're comparing vendors. Wouldn't your clients want to know if there are guarantees? I definitely promise you the participant wants to know. And then if there are guarantees, what actions have to be taken for them to kick in? So again, this is all immediate stuff that's going to come into play. And I can tell you from my own consulting business where Brad and I do prospecting, you know, we brought this up with some prospects. Hey, you're with a record keeper that doesn't have a guarantee. Is that what you want? Or do you want to consider someone else? Did your current advisor tell you that? You had no idea? Well, that's not good. Then these administrative tips. So there's basically a 12-step process that they think plan sponsors should go through to document what their cybersecurity protocol is. And there are tips, like I mentioned, for the participants. And some of these, you know, obviously you don't want to fall to a phishing attack or use free Wi-Fi. But again, where this really comes into play is when you're trying to get that guarantee. Now, ransomware, so those of you on the East Coast may have been impacted a little bit by Colonial Pipeline. So this is kind of a nightmare scenario for our industry. The good news for us is financial service companies definitely are at the forefront of defending against cyber breaches. They have to be because they have people's money. They are also usually, especially the larger ones, much more diligent and prepared for something like this because they'll have multiple backup sources for data. So in this particular case with ransomware, what happens is they steal your access to your own data and they basically shut you down. So imagine that in a retirement plan. Someone hacks into the record keeper, custodian, steals the data. Your participant can't go online and see what's in their account. They can't call customer service and find out because customer service has no access. So what are they going to do? They're going to panic and go to HR. How much work do you think is going to get done until that's resolved? Not a whole lot of work. If you're prudent as a fiduciary, shouldn't you be planning for something like this? So what we've always done in the past, whenever we do a record keeper transition, is right before the blackout starts, we'll go in and print out a report telling us the breakdown of funds by asset and source for each and every participant. Well, I think now going forward, you're going to have to consider doing that on a regular basis as a plan sponsor. A lot of the record keepers, you can set up automated reports. So maybe the first of every month, you generate a report telling you who owns what, and then you are ready and prepared if some kind of ransomware hack happened to you to let participants know, hey, we have background, we understand how much you had in your account as of this date. We know they have an insurance policy, so we know we're protected, so you don't have to worry because we prepared ahead of time. We've seen, like I mentioned, the DOL already come out and give these requests to plan sponsors. They've gone through all the questions. You can expect this to happen next year from auditors as well. I'll be shocked if the AICPA doesn't take these DOL pamphlets and incorporate them into their questions when they go through the annual plan audits. So again, it's not something you're going to be able to ignore and hope that you just don't get a DOL audit, because if it's 100 or more participants and you have an annual audit, again, I'll be pretty surprised if you don't start getting these questions next year. If you look at why this has been happening and why it's really a major event right now, the last hack that kind of shook the entire government and the Homeland Security Department was the SolarWinds hack. So SolarWinds is a company that produces software, and they have a program called Orion. And Orion is used by 33,000 different entities to manage their IT resources. So this goes right into the IT department. And basically, they think some Russian hackers got into this program and embedded in it. So when an update went out in March of 2020, it basically infected all 33,000 entities, which included some government agencies as well. And you can see some of the names there. And the scary thing is, they don't really know if it's out or if the hackers are out of all these systems or not. In fact, one of the, I think it was the head of the NSA, basically said, unless you destroyed all of your hardware, we couldn't tell you for sure that they're not embedded in your system. So we don't know what this may bring going forward. This could have some serious consequences for all types of companies, and they could be just sitting there dormant waiting for an activity to happen. So what you can do is be prepared. So when you look at, and I'm not sure what slide it'll be, but I'll get to the last slide and give Jill, oh, it actually is the last slide, there we go. When we say act, do not react, your time to ignore this is completely gone. You're going to have to act now. So what we're doing is we've taken all of the DOL questions that they came out with. We've added our own questions to those, and we have that right now being programmed into the B3 vendor comparison report. So in the future, when you do vendor comparisons, all of these answers will show up for whatever record keepers you're looking at. And in addition, you're going to be able to run an ad hoc report. So for your current clients, if they're with Fidelity or Empower or whomever, you can run the report, give them the answers to all the DOL questions as well as our supplemental questions, and they can stick it in the file. And now they're going to be prepared for any type of audit. But most importantly, it's going to help you have the conversation with them, which you need to do, and to implement some new policies and practices so they can be prepared for the worst case scenario should it happen to their plan and participants.
Thank you, Tom. So, as Tom mentioned, and thank you for tap dancing your way through that. That's not always so easy. As Tom mentioned, so we're doing the updates from a technology perspective, so it'll be within the portal, so you'll be able to generate it. With the ad hoc report, it would just be the security, the cybersecurity questions, so that could be a separate report. But we've also gone out already and we're collecting all the information on all the top tier providers. So that'll be available in advance of the technology changes on the portal for you, so that you can kind of look up, my clients with Fidelity, Empower, Principal, et cetera. Oh, here's the report on that. So you can deliver that to your clients without you having to go out and do all that data mining with them. So look for that in the next month and a half. To Tom's point, the Department of Labor is currently already asking these questions. So you need to be armed with that. So what you should be looking for from a macro perspective, more information, education, investment, CITs, et cetera, on the ESG front. More information, including education, in regards to cryptocurrencies. All of the documentation, templates, et cetera, to help you with the rollover situation, with the PTE that was issued, and then all the help that we're going to give you in terms of pre-populated documents, as well as the technology to go out and collect all the information in regards to cybersecurity. So a lot more coming to you within the next few months to make your lives easier, frankly, to help your clients meet their fiduciary responsibilities and to help you meet your fiduciary responsibilities. So thank you, guys, and thank you for your attention today.
Thanks.
Please welcome RPAG's Investment Hot Topics presentation featuring Chief Investment Officer Jeff Alvander and Director of Investment Research Jeff Keeling.
All right. Feels great to be back together, doesn't it? So we're quickly going to run through some investment hot topics, ESG, cash balance, and Bitcoin. And as I do see Nick Delavadova here, these hot topics are almost as hot as the San Francisco Giants in the final weeks of the pennant race. I think two and a half games ahead of the Dodgers, Nick. I think last time I checked. So first, ESG. We only have 30 minutes up here. ESG investing. This is really an outgrowth of SRI investing, socially responsible investing, like 30 years ago when I came into the industry, which was really more exclusionary, right? It excluded tobacco, firearms, alcohol. Now ESG investing is more purpose-driven, right? Investing for a purpose or some feel-good, something to feel good about. So we all know what the ESG metrics are, right? What's the E? Environmental, that's right, that's the first one. Conservation of the natural world. Climate change, carbon emissions, air and water pollution. What's the S? You guys are good, S. Social, consideration of people and relationships. And the last one, governance, that's right. So these are the purposes, right? Investing with these three lenses to promote outcomes, maybe. And it's gotten a lot of traction, a lot of significant growth. And when you look at the numbers, Vince had some of these numbers up yesterday. So these are a little older, but just look at the growth from 2014 to 2020 in terms of sustainable assets. It tripled in the past 6 years from 0.5 trillion to 1.7 trillion in 2020. So some significant growth. Some people have called this the Trump bump, right? When Trump was elected and he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, and people were like, well, I want to vote, I'll vote with my dollars for the environment. And so there's a lot of different reasons. Certainly the younger generation are getting behind this. And when you look at the numbers, the clients that are asking about it, 72% of Americans surveyed by Morningstar are or express some interest in sustainable investing. But there's a big but in there, and that's sustainable investing means many things to many different people. And why do I say that? Looking at this correlation chart of all of these rating agencies that rate companies based on their ESG factors, their correlations are all low, right? In the 30s, Some are in the 13, 20%. We got a couple ones that are high in terms of their correlation, 60s and 70s. Won't even pass the scorecard though, and it's pretty dramatic. And so what do these correlations mean? I mean, we can deep dive into one of them. It really means, in looking at Sustainalytics versus the S&P 500, well, if you look at that top left-hand red dot there, that means, well, Sustainalytics loves this company based on all of these ESG factors. This is a great company. They're doing all the right things, environmentally, socially, governance-wise. Looks like they're probably in the top 10th percentile in Sustainalytics rating. Well, then you look at S&P's ESG rating system, and wow, this company is horrible. This company is like maybe in the lower 10th percentile. Right? They're doing everything wrong from an ESG perspective. So who's right? Who do you weight? Is one maybe weighting the E more than the S or than the G? And this isn't just these two, right? This was at MSCI, everybody that you saw on that last chart. So ESG means many different things to many different people. So what's the guidance that we are relying on? What are we working off of right now for ESG? And so that's our old administration's guidance right here, our 2020 DOL guidance. The corollary principle is that ERISA fiduciaries must never sacrifice investment returns, take on additional investment risk, or pay higher investment fees to promote non-pecuniary benefits or goals. This is our guidance. Our current guidance, right? Who here when you read this knew what pecuniary was? Do I have any hands? I got out my dictionary and I'm like, all right, what does this mean? So I learned a new word when this came out, and that's ESG factors, right? So don't sacrifice returns, fees, risk, just in the name of ESG. Well, and why did they say this? Last year, if you were reading the Wall Street Journal this weekend, they had a great article. 25 funds actually changed their mandate from just a regular active fund into a sustainable or an ESG fund. And then guess what happened? Once they had that tag, hey, wait, wow, the flows started going up because people just wanted to be ESG. Okay, well, and I don't know if performance turned around. So there is maybe something to that. But, there's another but there, maybe ESG factors do work, and one of the leading groups out there, the CFA Institute, has said, wow, looking at ESG factors, if you incorporate this into your investment process, it can improve the analysis and ultimately the investment choices. So maybe there's something behind this. Right? It's not just ESG. And so this is the evolution of ESG now. And that may be the case. And what we're also looking at from the CFA Institute, and what we're following closely, is them getting behind some type of industry standard, because we saw earlier in some of those charts, right, that it means many things to many different people. So more to come on that. And there is some evidence out there. There is some evidence out there that ESG can drive alpha or outperformance in some of these funds. And this is just, again, a snapshot of just one certain period looking at the S&P 500 versus an S&P 500 weighted or reweighted based on some MSCI ESG rankings, overweighting those that are in favor, those that aren't. And it just shows over 5 years about 500 basis points of outperformance, 100 basis points of outperformance a year. So maybe there is some truth to ESG investing. And you heard Vince say, we're looking at ESG solutions, TDF solutions, individual single box solutions. We do have a current solution today that can fit into a core part of the menu. And that's our ESG balanced or sustainable balance fund, about 60-40, which is one-stop shop for anybody who wants a sustainable or an ESG fund that can be placed into the lineup right now without having to displace your single box managers, your large growth, small value, your target date funds. And how did we pick that fund? We certainly got together with the fund company, the managers, and looked at them and had that conversation about what screens they're using. But again, according to the guidance, and this is why the scorecard is still relevant, we're scoring it. We're looking at these funds, the performance, the risk, or the return. Do you need to sacrifice investment returns? No, you don't. And the same thing with expenses. When you get to expenses, we've been able to negotiate, and you heard Nick mention this the other day, right? The average was 34%. We're as high as the 50s in terms of discounts, leveraging $800 billion in assets. The expense ratio for this fund is at 32 basis points. So half the price of the rack rate mutual fund, which we are using Pioneer, Amundi, that balanced team to run the strategy. Again, fully sustainable ESG solution at basically half the cost and even more than that you can plug in. So all to say that there is more coming from us. There's certainly a lot that we're looking at in terms of building out more ESG solutions for you. The guidance that we're relying on, again, the scorecard remains very relevant. Is ESG adding alpha, right? Doing it from a risk-return perspective, that's the score. And then look at the expenses and what we can do. And certainly we're leveraging some better expenses, really because of all of your $800 billion and getting it at half the rate. So that solution exists, and keep your eye out for more that I think is going to be complementing the scorecard and what we do there in terms of ESG resources and ways that you can select and even solutions for different funds. So that's ESG. Do you have a clicker, Jeff? Yep.
I do.
Jeff, cash
All right.
balance.
Thank you, Jeff. So speaking of fast-growing segments of the market, cash balance plans are really the fastest-growing segment of the retirement business. So this is something you definitely want to pay attention to in your practice. So why are cash balance plans growing so rapidly? Really the biggest reason is that owners can significantly increase the amount of contribution they're putting into their retirement plan. That is the biggest single factor, and we'll look at the magnitude that we're talking about here in a second. But additionally, there's tax savings. The contributions that owners make into for employees are tax deductible, so there's tax savings advantages. They also are a qualified plan, so they provide asset protection. And then lastly, it's a great tool in this very competitive labor market to attract and retain talent. So this next page looks at what we're talking about, the additional flexibility to increase contributions. And you all know the 401k limits, $26,000 for folks over 50 and $19,500 below that. It's just simply not enough for a lot of these owners to put away enough for retirement. And you can look at that column with cash balance. The contributions that you can make to a cash balance plan are several multiples higher than can be done in the 401k plan alone. So this is a great tool. If you are working with plan sponsors, or if you're talking to owners and they're complaining about we can only put away $26,000 or $19,500 and we need another solution, this is a great opportunity for you to differentiate yourself and be a problem solver and talk to them about a cash balance plan, some of those attributes of cash balance plans and how that can really help them increase their retirement savings. So this doesn't mean you need to be an expert in cash balance plans. You need to understand what they are and what the benefits of them are. But when you get to that point where you have a client that's interested, you can bring in a TPA or a record keeper to come in and help you with the plan design and plan documents. And then we're here to help you on the investment side. We've created a cash balance CIT that is meant to be a one-stop shop for the investment solution for cash balance plans. This is a 338 service where we do manager selection and asset allocation. We have leveraged our size and scale, our collective size and scale, to bring you the best-in-class managers underlying at an all-in cost of only 26 basis points. And so with this CIT, what we're trying to do, as you know, cash balance plans have an interest crediting rate that you want to try to match with your investments. So we target a 3 to 5% rate of return while trying to minimize risk. So in addition to that 338 asset allocation and selection service, we also provide an annual asset allocation study where the RPAG Investment Committee builds our long-term capital market assumptions for all the different asset classes, and we update our allocation. So for example, in 2020, with rates being so low, our long-term capital market assumptions for fixed income were less than 2%. We needed to increase our equity exposure to achieve that 3 to 5% rate of return. So we increased equity exposure by 7% back in 2007, and now we are year to date, we're up actually about 6% in this CIT. Additionally, we provide quarterly commentary and reporting. This comes with a scorecard, a robust page that gives you a great summary of not only the top line CIT performance, but all the underlying funds, their expenses, their scores. We also provide quarterly commentary on all the underlying funds within the CIT, as well as performance commentary of the overall CIT. We want to make sure that this CIT remains in line with policy weights, so there's automatic quarterly rebalancing, that it's going to stay in line with those policy weights. And then the last thing that we've done to make it as easy as possible to implement this is we've created a sample investment policy statement that ties directly to the CIT. So it has the same investment objective, return that 3 to 5% rate of return while minimizing risk. And then the asset allocation bands that are allowed are the same that are within the CIT. And that's all built into that IPS. And so it really is this one-stop solution available at a very, very competitive price. And it's a great solution out there to really streamline your cash balance investment needs. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is Bitcoin. I was very surprised when Joel asked how many people had asked about adding crypto to their plans. I think it looked like about half the hands went up. So this is something that we'll go ahead and spend a minute talking about the appropriateness of adding Bitcoin to retirement plans. Actually, we've got some video of a recent RPAG Investment Committee meeting where we discussed this very subject. So can we just go ahead and roll that video?
Let's do it.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I am Mr. Bitcoin, here to see the investment committee.
Okay, you can follow me.
Excellent.
Hi, Mr. Bitcoin is here to see you all.
Hey, what's up? Who wants a shirt?
Welcome, Mr. Bitcoin, to the RPAG Investment Committee.
Glad to be here.
We invited you here today to really learn a little more about you and to determine if you are a suitable and appropriate investment for retirement plans. So first thought would be a great place to start for all of us to hear a little more about your returns history and your price stability.
Well, my returns have been pretty huge. Pretty huge. But, there was that one time in 2017 where I was down about 80%. And then this year it was down about 50%. But other than that, it's been quite good, quite good.
Other than that. All right, well, let's talk about how you're valued. Are you backed by any assets, or do you generate earnings, cash flow, dividends, interest payments?
Listen, Pops, I ain't got none of that. I don't have any of that. It's supply and demand. Supply and demand. My price is mainly driven by tweets from Elon Musk. Praise be. Praise be.
How would you describe the competitive landscape? Are there any other assets of your kind?
Yeah, there's a few. Well, there's only one Bitcoin, but there's a few other cryptocurrencies out there. There's Binance, Ethereum, Litecoin, Tether, Zcash, Dogecoin, Cardano, Polkadot, Stellar, Chainlink, Binance Coin. I don't know. The list goes on and on.
How would you expect to perform in different economic and market environments?
Who are you?
Evan.
Evan what?
Evan, that's all you need to know.
Well, Evan, I've been around for 12 years. So, you know, is that a robust sample size? I don't know. I've been kind of like this, but it's my preteen years. I need some time to grow up.
Well, since there's no need to mint or print currency, there must be some environmental benefits, right?
I love the environment, but I do take up a little bit of electricity, okay? You got to spend money to make money. I would say the size of my carbon footprint is about the same size as Portugal. Portugal's a small country, though.
Okay. I believe we have enough here to make our decision and would like to get together and discuss internally as an investment committee.
Great.
I think you may.
You want me to leave?
Yes, I think that would be great.
All right. All right, what do you got for me?
First off, Mr. Bitcoin, thank you for coming in today, and we appreciate that. We know you are a very busy person, and in fact, certainly very popular with many investors.
Correct.
Who feel that you do have a very bright future. However, as it relates to retirement plans,
No.
At this point, we do not feel you are a suitable or an appropriate option.
All right, well, thank you. You're gonna be sorry. You'll all be sorry. Give me that shirt back too.
There you go.
Evan, see you in 10 years, losers.
All right, thanks everyone. You may be security. Thanks everyone. I think that sums it up for our piece.
Please welcome the Financial Wellness Panel featuring WellSense Managing Director Jamie Hayes with RPAG members Fran Gillis and Holly Knight.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jamie Hayes, and my eyes are still watering from crying. I was laughing so hard at that. Bitcoin was hysterical. I am very excited to be joined here today by two of your rock star peers, and they are rock stars as advisors, as owners of their firms, and rock stars in selling WellSense. So I'm very excited to chat with you about our financial wellness program, WellSense. We have Fran Gillis, owner of 401k Extra, and we have Holly Knight, and she is and this is my favorite title that I've heard, the Director of Retirement Outcomes. So pairs perfectly with WellSense, and she is with Sapers and Wallace. I'm gonna try to use this here. There we go. So I'm going to share with you why we developed WellSense strategically and why it works with your clients and why it's a win-win-win situation for employees, employers, and for your bottom line. But you're going to hear really great success stories from both Fran and Holly on how they are winning new business, enhancing their existing relationships, and using this as cross-selling opportunities to grow their practice and their bottom line. So why we developed WellSense, I don't think we need to talk about the statistics, although I am going to throw some out at you, and why financial wellness is important, right? It is the talking point for all of your employer clients. Whether you know it or not, they are looking for a financial wellness solution. Every meeting that they go to, every fiduciary convention and forum, they're talking about financial wellness. They have to know that you at least have this arrow in your quiver. And we have built and designed an amazing program that is completely outsourced and solves for the problems that we have in today's environment. So what we found with existing solutions, like Nick mentioned yesterday, we've scoured the market for wellness solutions, and we've tried to implement some of them, but we found that there were problems with them, right? They're reactive, they're self-service. Employees have to find it on their own to take action or call the right person and figure out what to do with their money. They're meeting with folks who are not independent and not providing objective advice because they might be pushing a product. And they were very time consuming on their internal HR. Internal HR does not have the time nor inclination to run a sign-up sheet for a webinar Wednesday, let alone pick the title and the topic, and let alone provide an entire comprehensive financial wellness solution and track and measure the results. The existing solutions out there are low utilization, right? We're seeing about 1 to 2% utilization. I've seen service providers brag about 5% utilization in a committee room. So we've taken that and we've developed WellSense to solve for those problems. WellSense is completely outsourced off of HR, and we have built the entire tool, the entire engine, so that you, in providing this to your client, you're going to have scale and you're going to have capacity to provide this to your entire client base because of the tools and technology that are built in the RPAG system. Because it's outsourced to you, you're going to be managing the communications and the campaigns that are already custom designed. You're going to be managing that, sending that out to the employees. So that takes the time off of HR. That's going to be their biggest objection, is time. Is this going to take me any time? I don't have time. I'm working on so many projects. But if you say, no, it's not going to take your time, we're going to handle the entire program. And because we're handling it, we're going to get crazy utilization numbers. So again, bragging about the 5%, WellSense, we're seeing minimums around 30% utilization, higher, 50%, 70%, not to step on anyone's toes, but up to 90% utilization with certain clients when handled very effectively and efficiently. So when you solve for these problems, you're able to have a very successful approach and solve for a lot of problems at the employee level, at the employer level, and the advisor level. So the way it works, just a brief high-level overview, is again, it's proactive. It's built for you in RPAG. There's custom designed campaigns, and that's step one, is for you to deliver those emails and incentivize employees to take the first step, which is a financial wellness assessment. They can download the app to do that. They can click a hyperlink in any email, and they can go on a custom designed microsite. They're going to take a 5-minute wellness assessment. This was strategically designed. The questions were strategically designed. There's 17 questions, so it's high level enough to keep the employees engaged. They're not digging too deep where employees are going to say, oh, forget this, I don't want to finish it, right? It keeps them engaged throughout the 17 questions. 6 of the questions are SEC suitability questions, so you can provide advice when you're meeting with the employees. But it's comprehensive enough that it gives us really good data. We're going to have insights into what the employees are thinking. So instead of employers having to pick out of a hat, what should our Wellness Wednesday be about this month or next month, it's going to be strategic. It's a rifle approach, and it's going to allow you to thoughtfully design an education program that's going to speak to what your clients' employees actually need and want to learn about, that goes beyond the scope, potentially, of the 401k, right? You're not going to be talking about Social Security in an employer with 30-year-old employees that are worried about credit card debt or children's education. And those group session content are going to turn into the one-on-one meetings. So the technology is designed to drive employees to schedule a meeting with you. So right now you might provide education and communication to employees, and they might know because the employer told them once during enrollment or in their new hire package that they have access to you as an advisor. But again, they need to now reactively take action and call you up if they want help. And usually it's kind of surfacey, right? What's my username, login, how do I do this or how do I do that? With this technology, once an employee goes through the financial wellness assessment, it's designed to drive them to schedule a meeting with you that's already going to be logistically coordinated with you when you're going to be there on site or virtually available to conduct these group meetings and these one-on-one meetings. So you're going to be able to have many more employee meetings. Not only are you going to have more employee meetings, but they're going to be more intentional and more meaningful. So like I said, it's not like employees walking in and saying, oh, hey, can you help me log in? You know, I don't know the website, right? There's intent. They've gone through these 17 questions. There might be, you know, a little bit of a pit in their stomach because they don't know. Right now they're worried. They're like, oh, I've never thought about these questions before. I really need to sit down with somebody and figure out, am I going to make it? And if I'm not going to make it, I need a plan to drive me to take the right actions so that I can have a successful, not just retirement, but financial world today. And then, in addition to these meaningful meetings that you're going to have with the employees, you're going to have measurable and sustainable results that you can present to the retirement plan committee. You're going to have reporting that will give the employer insight into what their employees are thinking about. That's also going to give you opportunity to cross-sell into different areas. So if you do benefits or insurance, we're going to find out that, hey, their employees may not be aware of what's all available to them from a financial and investment standpoint within their current employer. And you can help with that. We're going to find out if there's a need for other lines of business that you can refer in and cross-sell. So what Fran and Holly are going to talk about is how this has been a win-win-win. We all know this is a win for employees, right? This is why we do what we do, to help employees. You know, they may have access to you now, but there's no specific technology driving them to schedule the meeting with you right now, so they're not taking advantage. So there's a ton of employees that will have access to sit down with you and have a meaningful, thoughtful financial planning discussion that never would have otherwise gone through with that process. They're going to be happy. They're going to be healthier. They're going to be more productive at work. And that's a win for the employer, right? To have less stressed employees who are appreciative of their benefit and who are more productive. That's driving up the bottom line to the employer. And then, needless to say, the benefits to you all. You know, you're going to win more business. This is a huge differentiator, to be able to win new business and keep existing clients happy. Retention skyrockets with WellSense, and you're going to have happier and healthier clients. So let's hear how this has impacted Fran's business first. Fran is the owner of 401k Extra. He's been serving corporate retirement plans and individual financial needs for 34 years, consults on approximately $200 million of assets under management, with an average plan size of just under $10 million. So Fran, tell us a little bit about your practice and the success that you've had with WellSense.
Thanks, Jamie. How many of you use WellSense already, or some financial wellness program? Show of hands. Okay, great. We learned from Jesse about efficiencies and the number of tools that RPAG provides. WellSense is one of those tools. And we also heard from Nick about profitability and some things you can do with FlexPath and some of the CITs to create greater margins. We use plan fees, which is one of the solutions that RPAG has. If you're not using it, we suggest you consider it. But before I get into the math and the numbers, one of the things we really love are the efficiencies. And Jamie touched on it, and Jesse talked about it, but the efficiencies at the participant level. So when a participant is signing up for an appointment, they get to explain exactly what their top priorities are. So it's efficient for you as an advisor because you're not wasting time figuring out what's really important to that person. And it's efficient for the sponsor because they're not burdened with a ton of administrative minutia to put this solution in place. And we hear it all the time. You know, employers love it because it's not adding an extra burden on HR or some exec person. And so it really is a win-win solution across the board. And a recent Fidelity study showed that 40% or so of sponsors are looking for advisors. And who are they looking for? They're looking for folks like you in the room, and not the generalists. We work with advisors around the country, and there's a lot of generalists out there that don't have the skills that you do, that don't have the knowledge that you do, and don't have necessarily the resources that you do. So you're perfectly positioned to take advantage of the monetary benefits that I'm going to talk about in just a second. So we're super excited about WellSense and what it means and what it has meant to our business. And so essentially when you take a plan, at least for our experience, when we look at a plan under $5 million, and if the current plan is with a generalist, the fees might be in the neighborhood of 30 basis points. And when you look at plan fees, if you're not familiar with how plan fees lays expenses out for the record keeper, the TPA, the advisor, investments, they'll break it down into the first third, the middle third, and the upper third. And we take the advisor fee from basically the lower third to the highest third, and raising your comp. And yet the overall plan expense ends up being in the bottom third, if not the bottom quartile, on an all-in expense basis. So we create a win-win situation for the participants, for the customer, and for you as the advisor. And it works equally as well for plans, in the 5 to 10 million or even larger. And what does that mean in dollars and cents if you're wondering, well, should I really engage in a wellness program or not? You can take, whether you're talking about a $3 million plan, a $3 million plan, when you do what I just said, is basically worth about a $10,000 a year engagement. And when you take it upstream and you take an $8 million plan, right? We listened to Nick talk about RPAG's average advisor with average size of 8 million and 30 plans. Both of these scenarios work out to be about $500,000 of extra revenue, but that's not the end of the story. That's just the beginning of the book. The end of the story in the industry, averages somewhere in the 4 to 5 times revenue on the plan side in wealth business if you're doing cross-sell and retirement planning and other services. And we just heard from the legal experts talking about it's acceptable if you're charging fees on the high end if you're providing those services. One of the things that WellSense does for us and can do for you is if it gives you the efficient channel to execute those services, charge fees on the higher end, raise your comp to where it should be. You're the neurosurgeon. The generalist that's out there that's charging 25, 30 basis points isn't doing anything. That could be considered a prohibited transaction for that sponsor, especially if they're getting paid out of assets. You're coming in and providing a much higher level of service, you're getting paid more for it, and customers love you. They love you. At least we've had a lot of positive, tons of unsolicited responses from sponsors. Utilization rate, Jamie mentioned it. We've had medical groups with zero incentive, and we accomplished in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% utilization rate. We've had others where the sponsor is engaged, and we have accomplished 90% utilization in year one. So we're super excited about the reporting that Jamie talked about and the corporate analytics. And I can tell you, sponsors have a tendency to sit up. When we start going through the analytics and the assessment results, they sit forward. They're not back in their chair. They are very front and center, and they're very responsive and paying attention to the data we are showing them, and that is a very active dialogue. So they love it. It really is a win-win situation. But that $10,000 engagement, where a lot of people stop, a lot of advisors stop, for us, when you're doing at 4 to 5 times basically revenue, you're looking at a $40,000 to $50,000 engagement with that customer. Well, if you do the math and just run it out on your 30 plans that was mentioned, you're talking $500,000. And the reality is it becomes $2 million of added revenue per year. We've been to the spring summits, and advisors, RPAG advisors have been doing this, and an average junior advisor will bring in $10 to $15 million of new revenue a year just in rollovers and ancillary type wealth business, not even to discuss the insurance and so forth. And Merrill Lynch, I've been at this more than a few years, and Merrill Lynch reported numbers years ago in the 7+% range or times range. So 4 to 5 is not an exaggeration at all.
And how has this impacted the success of your relationships, your attention, and see the feedback you've gotten is fantastic. Everybody likes to get paid, everybody likes to make a living, but you know what? One of the things that we love, we've gotten a ton of unsolicited response from participants saying how wonderful it is, and this is fabulous, that it really does relieve their stress. I like to say we're the purveyors of hope and clarity. So if you have a participant who actually has done some planning, we've had CFOs, CEOs, and other C-suite folks where we've helped them get clarity on their plans. And so that's been good. And other people who've never worked with an advisor love it because they get access. And now, where they were stressed about things before, we've been able to provide them hope. And that, there's no dollar for that. It's very rewarding. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Fran. So, Holly, you've had similar successes with Fran. So first, tell us a little bit about the role that you have within your practice. Tell us a little bit about your practice and the successes that you've seen through WellSense as well.
Sure. So my background, I have an economics degree, so finance, I love numbers, but I also have a degree in education, and that's kind of where my passion is. I've taught at every level from preschool through CEOs. Not a big difference, by the way, sometimes. But I say that, when I say that, I always get a laugh. And I say that because of how we take in information and how we kind of, work with that information. And everybody's very, very different. So my job is to I do all the group sessions. I oversee the one-on-one consultations. And what I was finding, we have a very small firm. It's a third-generation firm in Newton, Mass, right outside of Boston. It's a great firm, but we're small. And so from the retirement plan side, it's an entrepreneurial type environment, which means that we all wear a lot of hats. And I was kind of manning all of that. And I just said, we got to do something. And I just don't think we're not touching enough people. If the goal here is to actually move people forward, we're never going to be able to do it in this model. So we started looking at it. But prior to coming to Staples and Wallach, I remember my first, I cut my teeth in the industry in 2008. Great time. and I was a wealth manager. And so I knew nothing about retirement. So when I got into the retirement business, I still had that mindset of like, I just want to help people. I want to like help people, succeed, and however that is for them. And I remember going to an education meeting, and I was up there talking about the 401k and contributing more and upping their deferral rates, and it was like a blank slate of faces. There was like 75 people in the room. It's a warehouse environment, so these are like blue collar workers. And I was just like, I'm pretty engaging. Like, I don't understand this. What's happening? And then I realized they're all there for the free coffee and the bagels. But when I started talking to people, they're like, I can't defer more into my plan because I'm using a credit card to pay for my mortgage, or fill in the blank. But those were the stories I was hearing. And I remember going back to my boss, and I'm like, we're doing this all wrong. Like, we should not just be talking about 401k, because that's only one piece of a much bigger pie. And he goes, Holly, that's not your job. Your job is to go in there and talk about the 401k. And I said, you're right, this is not my job. And so I moved on. But so for me, like, being here is super exciting because I'm super passionate about this. I think it's really important. And I think if you do the right thing, you're authentic about it, and you actually care, you can make money doing it. When we first started, we weren't going to charge for this. So this wasn't about charging and making money. For me, it was about efficiencies. I'm like, I need to be able to scale this so that I can talk to more people, and I can't do it the way we're doing it now. So then, the discovery of like how you can actually make money doing this was fantastic. So it's been a really fun ride. It's been super successful. And I would say, part of what, to Jamie's point earlier, when a participant sits down with you as an advisor, you sit down, it can take a lot of time to unpack what that person's really there for. And a lot of times they don't even know. They know, like, am I deferring enough, or should I change my investments? I mean, they're pretty, benign questions typically, because they don't know what questions to ask. I would say for women in particular, because we do have a very large women work base, they are, for whatever reason, they have different reasons for this, but they're sometimes intimidated by it. They don't understand the jargon, and so they do nothing because they just don't, they're embarrassed by it. So really taking that step, being able to do the assessment, I can very quickly see, without having a conversation yet, I can very quickly see where they have gaps in those four main areas: personal finance, investment, retirement, and protection planning. So I can look at that and say, okay, you're doing great right here, but this looks like we could do some work here. And we sit there and we go through it, and we're uncovering things that they didn't even understand or know that they had gaps in it. So how do you improve your outcomes if you don't know what you're looking for, right? So it's been really great. One of the things that I do when I sit down with participants, they always have homework. I also teach at the University of New Hampshire, so I'm used to talking with students, but I give them homework. They could have 25 things that they need to do in order to improve their outcome. I never give them 25 things. So I usually give them like 3 or 4 assignments or things that they need to work on. They do that, they email me, and then we set up another meeting. So I'm on, we launched this in November of last year, and I'm on, some of these participants' 3rd, 4th, 5th consultation, and they are proactively coming to me. And I think the other part of that is gamification. I'm a big fan of gamification, and I think WellSense really kind of lets them, something about checking off a box and saying that I did that, I actually accomplished something, is a really fantastic thing, I think, as a participant. So, and then one last thing I would say, as far as group sessions are concerned, I don't know if, I'm sure this has happened to folks, but I've walked into a room completely prepared to talk about Social Security, and then I see a room full of 30-year-olds. And it's like, oh crap, like I totally missed the mark on this. Like, so this allows us, once we finish our launch period, which is usually about a month, we get that report, I can see, and we can report back to the committee, these are the top 4 things that your workforce is telling us that they need. So we don't have to guess anymore. We can just do it based on what they need versus what we think they need. So that's been a really great thing.
Right, so it's adding a lot of efficiencies and scale to the one-on-one meetings that you're having, making them very meaningful. You're having a huge impact on employees. What is it doing for firm revenue?
So for firm revenue, yeah, like we weren't originally thinking that we would charge for it, but then the more time we put in, our time is worth something, and the more time we were putting into it, I was thinking like, people would be paying a lot of money for this. Like, this is a very robust program that RPAG offers us for, you know, a very small price, in my opinion. So we started, now every executive committee meeting that we do quarterly, we bring up WellSense. We talk about WellSense, whether they have it or not. If they already have it, then we're doing reporting. If they don't have it, we're talking about it. And I talk about different things every time. But for us, it's been great because then we can go back to the record keeper. And we usually do this before we actually have our meeting. We check and say, okay, you know, we're about to hit this threshold. Let's talk about the fees. Can we lower those fees? So when we go into that committee meeting, right, you usually have a couple different personalities, different personas in the room. So you've got finance, you've got HR, and you've got leadership. And so being able to speak to each of those, you know, those core responsibility areas is really important. I mean, you can talk about all the EQ, emotional intelligence, and, you know, all the feel-good stuff that you're going to do for participants, but if you're sitting with, you know, the CFO, you lose him because he's thinking, I want to hear the numbers. How is this really going to impact us? So, you know, it's just been really great and easy. It's such an easy conversation. In the beginning, we would just, like, you know, vomit up a lot of information, and people were like, what? So it took us a little while, took me a little while to kind of figure out, like, okay, if I had 3 minutes to sell this, like, what are the 3 things that I would talk about? And so that's what I do. I kind of target it based on the people in the room. And I don't give them everything. I give them enough to make them curious enough to want more. And typically they do. So it's been super successful.
Great. So both of you are seeing that the win-win-win that we talk about, right? Obvious wins to the employee. They're happy, healthy, appreciative. Win to the employer. Win to you because you're winning new business. It's a differentiator. How are you battling objections? If I was somebody in the crowd, and we don't have time for Q&A, so you're going to have to catch them later tonight during cocktail hour, but I would want to know, what are the objections that you're getting when you're selling this? You're selling it for a fee to your clients. So what are the objections you're getting, and how are you battling them? Fran, you want me? Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, it's fees and time, fees and resources. Typically, when we talk about WellSense, HR folks get all giddy and excited, and then they instantly are like, oh God, that's too much work. It's just me, I can't do it. So, you know, we tackle the fees conversation right up front. We talk about if we're able to get some fee reductions, and then we have something great to offer, and then it's usually a no-brainer. From the HR perspective, that's really a big deal because the HR, I mean, these are the folks that are on the line, right? So they're the ones that are getting all the calls. They're the ones that are, sometimes being financial therapists for their employees and giving advice that they probably shouldn't be giving. So we talk to HR about, like, listen, this is a great program, and guess what? Outside of that initial, like, let's do some facts, let's uncover like what you need. You don't have to do anything. You could sit back and you get the reporting to you. So that's a big thing. Also, the one thing I would mention is one of the things that we hear, not just from, I mean, it gets asked in committee meetings, but from employees, is this confidential? That's a really big one because confidentiality, a lot of them are saying, like, I don't want my financial dirty laundry being aired to my employer. You're going to tell them. So we start that conversation every time with that. So it's an important piece.
Great, thank you. And Fran, what advice do you have if you knew then what you know now?
Oh boy. Well, I would first of all ditto what Holly just said, because it's administrative burden, and this is not administrative burden. It's efficient. It's easy for HR and the customer to adopt. Cost. There's ERISA buckets. There's forfeitures. There's saving expenses from investments using FlexPath and other options. Certainly have done really well. So understanding what the objections are up front and including them in your presentation, and like Holly said, just knock them out right away. Just get them out of the way.
Yeah.
And then you just talk about logistics and the details of what it takes to get moving and the timeline and the schedule. It really is easy, and it's fun.
Easy and fun. That's our business. So thank you for your time. Again, just to recap, the time and money, biggest objections. If you can hit those in your presentation when you're describing WellSense before they even have the opportunity to object, WellSense sells itself. So I'm happy to chat with you guys further about selling, pricing. Fran and Holly are happy to chat with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we head to the break, got a couple of announcements here. After the break, a couple of great sessions. Make sure you come back for that. We have target date funds with Kellen and Matthew from FlexPath, advisor panel about practice management with a couple more RPAG members, and then Passion is Not Enough, and that's a diversity inclusion panel with some outside experts. Really look forward to that. You know, the 20th anniversary of 9/11 was just a couple days ago, as we all know, and I think back 10 years ago at the RPAG conference doing a 10-year memorial, and it feels like a million years ago, but then it feels kind of close with everything happening in the news. And then I think back 20 years. I was a senior in high school. A lot of uncertainty what was going to happen to an 18-year-old Jesse Taylor. And even talking with some of you last night, they were there in New York City or had loved ones who perished or were first responders. Some of you even had military service. And it's a very emotional thing. And, you know, I think for 20 years, we just have a little moment of silence. Thank you. And, you know, we're a very patriotic organization, and, you know, that's why we support CCI, Canine Companions, and their Wounded Veterans Organization. Talked about it last night. I've seen a lot of you have donated and signed up for the charity cornhole tournament later this afternoon, but please donate. It is an amazing cause, and we talk a lot about it, but we have a little video to share more about CCI and their initiative that they have.
The dogs are just totally amazing, so well trained, such a well-run organization.
So it's aimed at veterans that have PTSD that's all combat related. They do have some that overlapped with the service program along with this program, so they all learn like retrieve. They learn a component of tug, same with light. What's a little bit different with this program specifically is they do learn nightmare interruption where they interrupt nightmares. They learn anxiety interruption where they interrupt an anxious behavior.
To be able to give back to people who have served our country and, you know, sacrificed so much of their life makes it even more special for us that we're able to give them this gift of a dog that is not only going to help them to gain more independence, but it's going to be their best friend and their rock at the end of the day. It's really rewarding and emotional a little bit.
CCI changed my life. I would almost go as far as saying that CCI saved my life, because Domi and Kylan, at times when life is tough, and I think about the horrible things from war and death and violence and loss of friends, and loss of enemy and things that I've had to do at war, I always have a dog that gets me through it.
They get their personality back. They get their whole life back. You're helping others come back to what they used to be.
Their donations are beyond generous, and without their support, organizations like this wouldn't exist. So seriously, thank you.
Thank you. Amazing organization. Thank you. And we're very fortunate to work in an industry that has allowed us to continue to work and help millions of Americans. And let's be generous and give back to these folks who allow us to live and accomplish our dreams. So let's donate and set a record year for CCI. Before we go to the break, thank you. I've had a couple of questions. The slides to all the great content that you're seeing today will be on the Resource Center. You could download them. If you can't find it, email support@rpag.com and they'll make sure to point you in the right direction. Badges, please wear your badges at all meals. You know, with COVID and compliance here at the hotel, we ask that you do not bring your guests or spouses. they get to enjoy beautiful Laguna Beach and Dana Point, California, and there's some great recommendations for other spots. But tonight for the evening event, let's keep it within our group. And if anyone needs a recommendation for their guest or spouse, I'm happy to share some of my favorite local spots. And then so we're going to go to a 20-minute break. So come back at 10:20 a.m. back here in the ballroom, and then we're going to have target date funds, advisor panel, and diversity inclusion. So thank you. All right, everyone, let's get settled down. It's 10:20, so we'll come back from the break. And by the way, I saw a lot of you at the CCI booth donating. Thank you very much for that. As a reminder, we will be having a 25 cents on the dollar match. So please, we'll have an update before the end of these morning sessions, and we'll try to hit a little bit of a goal. And remember, the prize raffle drawing is this evening during the networking reception out on the Dana lawn. Before we get going, Nick brought up our Backstreet Boys in One Direction, and the Custom Solutions team. It's a fun running joke. I actually like the slide that Vince had. It's the Breaking Bad. That's I feel like they've evolved from Backstreet Boys to cooking up some good stuff in the basement. But they're always cooking up some interesting things and good solutions, new ideas to help you sell and market yourself, not just on Custom Solutions, but everything RPAG. They're a great resource, and they recently put together a great video that helps you with participant education. So let's roll that.
There are some challenges in life you may be prepared to take on, and there are others where you'd rather trust a professional. The same holds true when investing for retirement. Some people enjoy the challenge of managing their own investments, while others prefer to let professionals pilot their investment strategies. If that's you, there are professionally managed custom investment options which follow sophisticated flight plans that adjust for your time to retirement. Known as FlexPath Target Date Funds, they seek to provide diversified investment options that balance between growing your investment and protecting against risks to help you advance toward your retirement goals. Similar to how a plane's glide path adjusts as it approaches its destination, each Target Date Fund's investment allocation changes as you approach your retirement. FlexPath offers 3 glide paths based on your risk tolerance. No matter which option you choose, when you're young and far from retirement, the investment mix is more aggressive to help your investments grow. As you approach retirement, the fund automatically shifts to a more conservative investment allocation with the goal of preserving your savings. When you arrive at your desired retirement date, the fund shifts to an investment mix designed to help you retain spending power through retirement. So if you like the idea of gliding into retirement with the help of professionals managing your investments and the flexibility to select the right path for your retirement, FlexPath Target Date Funds are available to help you on your journey. Visit your retirement plan website to learn more today.
Please welcome our session on Realtors' Approach to TDFs, Kellen Foley and Matt Giovinazzo.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kellen. This is Matt. We're the OG Backstreet Boys. But today we're actually going to be talking about a realtor's approach to target date funds. So as many of you know, right, the real estate market has been absolutely insane lately. So we thought we'd capitalize on that, doing what we do best, and launch a brand new target date fund series. It's going to be 99% REITs. We'll have 1% to just something else, so it still qualifies as QDIA. No, just kidding, of course. All right, we understand realtors may not make the best target date fund managers, but we do think there are important lessons that we can learn about how realtors approach their business that we can apply to ours. Mainly the 6% commissions, right? Nick, Vince? Okay.
So we're not changing careers. We're staying at RPAG. All right, we're staying at RPAG. All right, so consider the residential real estate industry and the profession of a realtor. It's highly competitive, right? At any given point, there's way more real estate agents than there are homes for sale in the US. So they're all competing against each other, trying to differentiate their value to clients, right? There's also kind of this sidecar to realtors, which are those sites that we've all used that make it really easy for us as potential home buyers to get data and inventory, right? Like Zillow, Trulia, all those sites. You can find inventory, price, square footage, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, etc. So does a realtor, or does at least a good realtor, when you're meeting with them and they're trying to sell you a home or trying to sell you their services, are they just reciting the same stats that you really could have found on your own, right? And they're not really adding any value? They're really not, right? They may mention those things because you kind of have to know them. But really the value that a realtor provides, and a good one that would make you want to hire one, are those intangibles, right? So things like investability and the quality of the finishes. Are they perfection? Like what Frederick would say for any $1 million listing watchers. And even houses that aren't available, on the open market and that you might not be able to find on a Zillow or a Trulia. So it's really those unique aspects where a realtor adds a lot of value and why you would want to hire them. It's kind of the same thing, or at least similar, in the advisory world, right? We know that our industry is more saturated than ever, right? It's tough to compete. We also live in a digital age where information and data is more readily available than ever. So plan sponsors can get information on target date funds, or really any fund for that matter, things like returns and expenses from really any number of places. What's going on?
Oh no, it's the ghost of performance past. What are you doing here?
Performance is always indicative of future results.
I'm so sorry, everyone. We've been trying to banish him for some time. He gets glitchy and repetitive. He's been kicked out of so many meetings. He just talks about the same thing. Be gone. We're going to banish you once and for all. You've caused enough confusion and obsession. So anyway, yes, returns are commonly emphasized and commonly discussed. So does it really make sense for us, like the realtors, to talk about the things that are available on Zillow and Trulia, to just keep the conversation to that? Clients don't even need us for that anymore. They can get information from a fiduciary outsourcer, any advisor, a record keeper, third-party sites directly. So in order to add unique value, we need to be talking about those things that are a little bit different, right? That others aren't talking about. And frankly, these are our best opportunities from a business standpoint to discuss something different and be unique. What's also great about that is that our incentives are aligned with really participants and outcomes. The things that we can focus on, things like underlying fund construction, glide path design, and suitability, also are the biggest drivers of outcomes.
All right, so we thought it'd be fun to mix it up a little bit and do a poll question. So hopefully everyone downloaded the app on their phone. So if you actually can take out your phones, this is your one opportunity to text while we're talking up here, and we won't notice. But go to our session, A Realtor's Approach to Target Date Funds, and scroll down, and there will be an option for a live poll. So the poll question is, what is the ultimate objective of a target date fund? Right? Should be pretty simple, but let's run through the potential answers here. So is it A, reduce investment fees as much as possible? B, maximize return over the last 1, 3, and 5 year time periods? C, obtain a sufficient income replacement ratio at retirement with as little uncertainty as possible? Or D, maximize participant wealth at retirement? So I'll give everyone a few seconds to respond, and then we'll take a look at the live results.
You know what to do. Don't let their CFA, or should I say, can't follow arithmetic designations fool you. Let past performance guide you to the truth.
All right, that's enough. Ghost of performance pass, you're banished. Let's take a look at the results. Let's see if he swayed you. Interesting. So he didn't sway you. So A and B were the least responded to answers, which is actually kind of ironic to me, because what do you hear about all the time when people are making target date fund decisions? Fees and performance, right? What is the performance over the 1, 3, 5 year time periods, and what are the expenses? So it's actually kind of ironic that those were the least responded to, since those are by far the two most common factors, I think, that we hear all the time talking to plan sponsors about what they want to see, right? The most amount of people answered D, maximize participant wealth at retirement. That is the wrong answer. So to understand why, let's take a look at this chart. So I get it, right? Maximize wealth at retirement. Why wouldn't you want to do that? But to understand why that can't be the right answer, you really just need to consider the structure of a target date fund glide path. So of course, right, a glide path gets more conservative over time as a participant approaches retirement. What is that doing? Well, it's reducing risk, obviously, but what happens when you reduce risk? You reduce expected return as well, right? And when you talk about maximizing wealth, effectively what you're saying is maximizing long-term return. But a glide path systematically reduces your expected return over time, right? So the fact of the matter is if your goal is to actually maximize participant wealth at retirement, a target date fund is a really poor choice of investment, right? You'd be better off maximizing your expected risk and return, i.e. fully staying invested in equities, right? That's going to give you the best chance of maximizing return over an extended period. Of course, no one does that because it's too risky, right? So when you look at the yellow chart, that top peak, your max wealth may be higher, but your minimum wealth at retirement may be a lot lower as well because of the volatility. And then your shortfall risk in retirement is going to be much greater as well if you continue to stay invested that aggressively. So the right answer, of course, then is C, right, which is achieve a sufficient replacement ratio at retirement with minimum uncertainty. And the key to understanding why that is the correct answer is to bring in the liability side of the equation. So the idea, right, isn't to necessarily blindly grow our assets, but it's to grow assets in line in order to meet liabilities, right? Said another way, what is my target replacement ratio, and what is the asset allocation now and over time that has the best chance of getting me there? So I like to always kind of bring it back to an example of a pension plan. So I'm sure a lot of you do defined benefit pension plan consulting as well. Think about like an LDI glide path that you might create for a pension plan, right? As the pension plan's funded status increases, the glide path rolls down and the asset allocation becomes more conservative. Well, in all intents and purposes, a target date fund glide path is essentially doing the same thing, right, in simplistic terms, for an individual participant in a 401k plan. And that's why it's so important from a process perspective to not just pick a target date fund that has the best performance, right, but a target date fund that has a glide path that aligns best with the plan's demographics. So what about risk-adjusted return, right? Well, I'll concede it's absolutely better than just looking at absolute return because risk-adjusted return brings in market risk. But that's the shortfall, right? It's only market risk. It's only standard deviation. When you look at things like Sharpe ratio that, of course, we all consider as part of our analysis, when it comes to individual single box funds, large cap growth, large cap value, these sorts of metrics are incredibly helpful. But in a target date fund, it just misses all these other risks that participants face, right? Sequencing risk, inflation risk, longevity risk, participant behavior risk. It goes on and on. Market risk doesn't tell the full story. And ultimately, what Sharpe ratio really ends up doing is just telling us what asset classes were most efficient over a relatively short time period, right? Whether it's 1, 3, 5 years, whatever it is. So as an example, take large cap growth and large cap value. So until very recently, the 3-year standard deviation for large cap growth was actually less than the 3-year standard deviation for large cap value, right? Well, you wouldn't necessarily expect that to be the case forever, and it's already started to reverse. So not only did large cap growth have the best performance, right, but it also had the lowest volatility, just went straight up and to the right. But that's already started to reverse and obviously will move in and out of favor. So any target date fund with a tilt towards large cap value has looked incredibly strong, not just from a return perspective, but also from a risk-adjusted return perspective. But over a 5-year period, that doesn't really tell us much. And obviously, it's still a very returns-based approach, right, versus the asset liability approach that we talked about earlier. So how then do you incorporate return into a target date fund evaluation, right? You can't necessarily ignore it altogether, and we understand that, and we're not advocating for that by any means. But there's basically three main components to a target date fund's return. It's glide path, the asset class tilts, and the manager selection. So glide path and asset class tilts are largely going to go where the market goes, right? Aggressive glide paths, higher equity glide paths are going to outperform in bull markets. More conservative glide paths are going to outperform in bear markets. Same thing with asset class tilts, growth value like we just talked about, right? It's going to kind of wash out. Aggressive glide paths probably going to outperform conservative ones over a long term, right? Because expected risk and expected return is higher. But we just talked about that's not the ultimate goal of a target date fund anyway. So really, those are more qualitative considerations, right? Pick a glide path that best fits the plan. Consider your target date fund tilts qualitatively. But really, the return component of a target date fund that is meaningful is the manager selection, right? It's meaningful to compare over shorter term time periods, and it's the only one that's really apples to apples. You can't compare an aggressive target date fund to a conservative target date fund over the last 5 years, because aggressive is going to outperform every single time, right? But manager selection, regardless of your glide path risk posture, regardless of asset class weightings, are the managers being used underneath the target date fund adding value, right? Or if it's an index strategy, are they tracking the benchmark as closely as possible? So that's really the return component of a target date fund that we advocate focusing on. And of course, the RPAG scorecard process allows you to do exactly that, because we isolate that as a portion of the overall RPAG score.
All right, so what is our process then, and how do we solve this Rubik's Cube? You see what I did there? I can't solve one. The intelligence skipped a generation, but. All right, so we are going to get to those commonly evaluated factors like the return and risk, hold, ghost. But first, we just need to isolate and really prioritize a few other factors. So the first is plan fit analysis. And Kellen mentioned that goal of a target date fund, which is to achieve a sufficient replacement ratio with as minimal uncertainty as possible. I think that was it, right, Kellen? So I picture that as what you're really doing, kind of what DB plans do, right? You're aligning your funded status with the risk profile of the target date fund, right? And that seems so familiar and so common to us because that's what all DB plans do. If we could just go back one slide. So obviously the rule of thumb there is for well-funded plans, you can afford to de-risk, right? Narrow your range of possible outcomes, and for underfunded plans, they need more risk. Every DB plan does that. That's what LDI is. That's what ALM is, asset liability matching. But we completely ignore it in the DC world, and we really don't have to. DC plans have liabilities as well. There's really just two differences about them. Number one is their liabilities and risks on employees instead of the employer, right? And then number two, those liabilities are just a little bit different in nature. So they're just the future income payments or the distributions that participants need to make in retirement, right? And so while it can be costly for a DB plan to not implement LDI and get that piece right, it similarly can be costly for employees in the DC world if we don't get this right. There's also the added element of participant behavior on the right side here, right? We live in a participant-directed world for DC and 401k plans, right? That means participants can obviously change their election, so we can't be assuming too much risk with the target date fund and be in something aggressive when during a drawdown like what we saw last year, if that encourages participants to bail out of the fund and move to cash or to cut or eliminate their contributions entirely, or it can just cause a lack of productivity at work. So plan level fit analysis. And when thinking about examples, I commonly think about differences in industries. I think we all do this. Thinking about a typical, let's say, manufacturing plan versus a healthcare plan. You instantly think of like a different typical demographics. But these differences persist even within one industry. We're going to stay on real estate here because it's more fun to talk about TV shows than any actual plan. And the key here is, as Kellen mentioned, we want those 6% commissions go into real estate sales, not home flipping. They make more money and have higher balances. I'm just kidding. That's not it. All right, so you got your two camps here. Your $1 million listing crew, high balances, savings rates, good employer match. They should be in a conservative target date fund, again, to narrow the range of possible outcomes and increase the likelihood of maintaining that replacement ratio, which is already great. You've got your love it or list it crew, which is the opposite. Lower balances, savings rates, no employer match. They need to be invested aggressively like a DB plan, right? Make up for that funding shortfall. Give themselves a chance to grow their account enough so that by the time they're in retirement or reach retirement, they can sustain their lifestyle, continue paying for marriage counseling, since they're always getting in fights on the show. So this is...
I don't think they're married.
I'm more of $1 million listing guy. Frederic.
Right, well, so that's the plan level side of it, right? The next step in our analysis is the participant level analysis, right? Kind of taking that same concept, but one step further and deeper and bringing it to the individual participants. So we talked about looking at this from a funded status perspective, like a DB plan would, right? Well, a DB plan, of course, is a pooled retirement plan with one funded status, so it makes sense that one glide path would be created based off that plan's funded status. And on the 401k side, right, or the DC side, you can kind of do the same thing looking at average plan characteristics, but since a DC plan is a bunch of individual accounts, each individual participant is going to have their own funded status, and that can vary widely depending on their individual circumstances. So the fact of the matter is that one glide path isn't necessarily going to be as effective in a DC plan as it is going to be in a DB plan. But you can actually measure this risk. We call it misfit risk. And the way you can do this is by looking at a distribution of savings rates for participants in the plan, right? Savings rate is going to be the primary input into determining someone's funded status or replacement ratio, and we'll get to that in a minute. But real quick, the distribution here just shows you, okay, how many participants are saving under 6%? They need to be on a more aggressive approach. How many participants are saving greater than 12%? They can afford to de-risk and be on a more conservative approach. And then, of course, how many people are in the middle? So using this example, the moderate glide path in this case would be the best fit overall, right? That's where 54% of participants lie. But that also means there's 46% of participants where they need to either take more risk or less risk based on their individual circumstances. So 46% misfit risk, 69 individuals in this case that are exposed to sort of that misfit. So to understand why we use savings rate and kind of why this can be such an impactful example is, as I said, savings rate is the primary input into determining someone's replacement ratio, right? Replacement ratio isn't that readily available of a stat, right? In record keepers, sometimes we'll be able to provide that. Savings rate is very easy, and this is how it can impact. So we take two examples. Two participants have the same exact characteristics. The one difference is the low saver is saving 5% of her salary her entire career, and the high saver saves 12%, keeping everything else constant. While the low saver ends up with a replacement ratio at retirement of just 44%, right? That's not going to get it done. They need to emphasize growth in the way they're investing in order to make up for that shortfall. The high saver, on the other hand, 96% replacement ratio at retirement, which is fantastic. So again, meet or grow your assets in order to meet your liabilities, right? That participant doesn't need to focus on growth. They can focus more on stability of capital and preserving what they're diligently saving away. So sticking with the same example, right? We have Hillary and David here from Love It or List It. Matt obviously doesn't watch the show.
Not married, by the way.
I do.
Just so you know.
For any of you that do, the concept is, you know, Hillary renovates the home, and at the end, they either decide to love it and stay with Hillary's renovation, or they decide to list it and go with the house that David is trying to sell to them, right? Well, David never wins, ever. Everyone decides to love the house that Hillary renovated, so she's crushing it, right? She has a huge account balance, great savings rate. She's saved up because she's doing a great job saving for retirement, so she can be more conservative. David's struggling, right? He hasn't been able to save as much, so the fact of the matter is he probably needs to take on a little bit more risk in order to make up for that difference.
I thought this was a dating show like The Bachelor. I've been watching too much of that.
So, right, the theme of this conference is, of course, forward, right? You see it real big behind us. But we think personalization truly is the future within the target date fund space and the QDIA space, more broadly speaking. And we also believe that our ability as advisors to solve for that issue of misfit risk is going to be a huge differentiator and factor in our future success. So with that in mind, an advisor actually, one of your peers, showed me this old video, it's from 2017, from our friends over at Morningstar that we really got a kick out of, so we wanted to play it for you here. It's called Bob's First Day.
Well, I hope I've given you a good understanding about your benefits package. What else can I help you with?
Any guidance maybe with the 401k, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, no problem at all. You are not alone on that. I think you find most of our employees are in the same boat as you. So let's take a look and see if we can't get you set up.
All right.
How old are you?
I am 42 years old.
So we're going to assume, though, that you are 40 for this. Annual salary?
We agreed on 150,000.
Of course.
Annual,
yeah. Annual salary, 70,247. Education, bachelor's degree. You watch that? My wife loves The Bachelor.
I have an MBA as well.
Speaking of wives, any spousal assets? We should put that in here.
I'm not married.
Let's say that spouse makes 43,562. Not bad. How many children do you have? I know. 1.6 children. Do you have a pension?
Do your employees have pensions?
Do our employees have pensions? No. Don't be ridiculous. No one has a pension anymore. You have any other assets outside of the 401k?
I've got a little money grandmother.
That's awesome. Honestly, doesn't matter. Total wealth, 119,846.
I'm sorry, where are you getting that number from?
Don't worry. This information just describes an average 40-year-old's retirement plan, just like you, Bill. So, I'll tell you what. Why don't I fill the rest of this out on my own? It'll just speed things up, all right?
Isn't that great? So a few key takeaways. The first one is, whose first question in a new job is, can you help me with my 401k? Wouldn't our job be a lot easier, or I guess it might be harder with more questions from that? But also, no one likes to be treated as average or just ignored, right? We saw it in the video with Bob, and we see it with target date funds. It's essentially what all target date funds do to participants, though. They're ignoring all those unique factors, and it's not personalized in any way. So there's clearly value in personalization, and we can think about this conceptually. There's actually a Morningstar study. Kellen's brain or computer, whatever you want to call it, actually can make sense of this stuff, but it is mathematically and quantifiably better when participants or any investor is invested in a portfolio that fits their own unique characteristics. What's actually happening is you're uncovering additional value and increasing the probability of them reaching that target replacement ratio. So there's actually math behind this, and we're doing a great deed, the altruistic side of what we're doing and improving outcomes. But it's very just easy to conceptually understand. The way my small brain thinks about it is, if I go from wearing my size 10 shoe to a size 11, that fits me better, Cinderella slipper, it works. So it doesn't have to be super complicated, the discussion with clients. So there's value in that personalization, right? And we know that we can solve for misfit risk with multiple glide paths. And so the key is really just, how do we implement it? You can do it through multiple glide paths. You can do it through managed accounts, a risk-based series, one-on-one education. You just have to measure and kind of weigh what all the costs are of that. So is there additional costs for offering personalization? Does it require a lot of your time? And does it require a lot of attention and effort on the part of participants? The most cost-effective and simple way of achieving personalization is through multiple glide paths. So that you're able to solve for the masses. You see here that in this case, 54% of participants needed that moderate risk level. So you're solving for the masses and helping participants by selecting that as your default, right? No actions needed for those participants. That's automatically their starting point. But instead of the conversation ending there and still having 46% misfit risk, you're able to really cover the entire spectrum of everything, of savers, low, mid, high, of funded status, low, mid, high, as well as risk tolerance, right? For the risk-averse group, for the risk-tolerant group, everyone's able to get allocated according to their own unique needs and circumstances. All right, now, no, that's it. He thought he got me. It does say returns on the slide. And we can't completely ignore it. We have to address it. But this isn't just about the returns themselves or FlexPath itself. It's really about, what do those returns mean and how are they providing the proper chassis or vehicle for participants to get what they need? What do I mean by that? Well, normally you kind of have to emphasize what you want out of your target date fund, right? And that's really, so on this screen you're seeing upside metrics on the left side, up capture and return. Do you want to emphasize that, but you know you're going to kind of suffer on the risk spectrum, right? Do you want to emphasize more stability and get better down capture and standard deviation? And that's what doing plan level suitability, what you're really doing is you're choosing which of these do we want to focus on, and you're doing that based on the demographics to, again, fulfill the objectives of participants. But you don't really have to just leave it at that. Again, we can deliver the vehicle and the chassis and the means for all participants to get invested and accomplish their own unique needs and objectives. So for those that are underfunded and need more risk or are comfortable with more risk, they can be invested in FlexPath Aggressive and get better up capture and outperformance over the typical target date fund of 1% annualized. And then those that are well-funded need to focus more on protecting that good replacement ratio they've worked so hard to build. Or those that are risk averse, they can be invested in FlexPath Conservative, get a lower down capture and lower standard deviation. So again, you're covering the entire spectrum and solving for that misfit risk.
All right, so we've gone really deep into sort of how we think about evaluating target date funds more than just surface level, right? And the idea really is, be Frederick, right? Be the rich realtor guy like that in the picture that is doing stuff above and beyond the numbers that you can get from Zillow, right? Or in your case, right, go above and beyond the returns and fees information that anyone can look up with a click of a button on Morningstar. So take the time to go one step further. And all these other benefits really stem from that, right? Make your action the difference maker, which is the fit analysis portion, picking the right glide path, versus making the manager's action the driver, right? Performance. Put yourself in that driver's seat. At the same time, right, what does that allow you to do? Well, it closes the door to competitors. This may be the biggest point on this slide. How many times have you had to answer questions from your clients about, oh, hey, I heard there's this other target date fund that has better performance or lower fees, right? Well, if you're setting expectations and talking to them about what's really important, i.e. glide path fit, based off plan's funded status, right, you're going to head those questions off before they even get started. That also means there's less need for you to defend and talk about target date fund performance ongoing, right? Oh, hey, our target date funds are bottom quartile over the last year. Who cares, right? In the long term, it doesn't make a difference, right? It's about focusing on fit and what's important. And based on what the market's done, that may or may not be expected, right? So it allows you to focus on plan design, well sense, things like that allow you to improve your business as well as outcomes for your clients. If you're doing something like FlexPath, right, or you're doing one-on-one education meetings, that obviously allows you to enhance your participant education opportunities, getting people on the right glide path, solving for misfit risk. And then, of course, it allows you to win business. Matt and I did a presentation yesterday talking about our red flag sales approach in the workshop. Right, we've won a ton of new business on the NFP side, as well as helping RPAG advisors use this concept of misfit risk and target date fund suitability as a differentiator to win new business as well. So before we let you go, we wanted to leave you with a couple concrete sort of action items to take away. The first one here is calculate your added value. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the cost analyses that we've run for the CIT mappings, right, where we can take an existing lineup, map it over to the CITs where they can add value, and then we show and calculate the cost savings, right? And that's sort of your value add that you're bringing to the table as an exclusive RPAG advisor. This is really taking that same concept but applying it to target date fund suitability. So without going through the example in too much detail, basically what we're able to do is take that savings rate distribution, right? In this case, there's 71% misfit risk in this particular example. Say there's $10 million in target date funds in this particular plan, right? That means there's $7.1 million that are currently exposed to misfit risk. Well, Matt went through the calculation from Morningstar. If you can get a participant just 10% closer to their ideal portfolio, that's worth 12.5 basis points. So let's be conservative and just say, hey, we're eliminating misfit risk by just getting participants 10% closer, right? In reality, you can probably get a lot closer to that, and then these numbers will increase. But at just 12.5 basis points times the 7.1 million, That's $8,900 in immediate value add just by eliminating misfit risk, right? That's above and beyond the value add that you provide in the infinite other ways, right? The CITs, et cetera, where we're able to calculate this. And over a 5-year time period, right, multiply that out, because of course this is ongoing, that's nearly $50,000 in added value. So this can kind of be a useful exercise when you're bringing to a prospect kind of the value add that you can provide to help offset your fees as well as the advisor. And then lastly, let us help you cook up target date fund perfection, right? We're our team here to help you. Myself, Matt, Jonathan, and Alex on the team are presenting next. Hopefully you heard our new band members, Alex and Brett, yesterday at the workshop who spoke as well. We're all standing by ready to actually help you create these target date fund analyses. We'll actually do the work for you. We just need some basic plan information to get that done. So thank you very much for the time. We really look forward to helping you with your next case. Thank you.
This next session will keep your business moving forward. Please welcome Alex Kahn and Jonathan Coombs from RPAG and FlexPath, joined by RPAG members Bryce Sowich and Renee White.
So this one all the way down.
Well, good morning. Again, my name is Alex Kahn, Senior Investment Advisor with FlexPath Strategies, and today I have the pleasure of moderating our RPAG Superstar Packed panel titled How to Keep Your Business Moving Forward. Many of you may recognize me as a member of the Custom Solutions team, as we just saw, Matt and Kellen, great presentation. Responsible for the distribution of RPAG's exclusive CITs, apparently a boy band member, a chemist perhaps, along with Nick's presentation from the other year. He signed us up to wash your car, clean your barbecue at any time as well, so don't forget that. It's quite the service. Thank you for having me here today. Now, while preparing for today's discussion on just how to keep your business moving forward, I continue to find myself revisiting in my mind one of the frameworks that RPAG's investment committee works off of, and I think it really pairs with the theme of today's session moving forward, which is people, process, and philosophy. All right, this has been a way in which Jeff Elvander, RPAG's Chief Investment Officer, has really built a framework around conducting qualitative investment manager research as a supplement to a fund's overall score. And I had to admit, this did take me down a bit of a rabbit hole as I was curious about the origin of that phrase, because not only have I seen other investment managers or other investment advisors, some of you within the room today, using iterations of that within your own websites and your own practice, but I've seen iterations from industries seemingly unrelated to what those of us within the room do. And as I went down that rabbit hole, I found a few things. The first was an article from the CFA Journal in June of 2010, which I had to admit, didn't take me by surprise. Much of our best thinking and best practices have come from the fact that we do have a CFA-led investment committee. And as far as I could tell, Russell Investments started talking about their 3 Ps back in 1969. And then the second thing I found, which really did grab my attention, was a book that I had actually never heard of before from 2011 titled The Innovator's DNA. And in this book, authors Jeffrey Dyer and Hal Gregerson worked to answer the questions, how do I find innovative people for my organization, and how do I become more innovative myself? And in searching for those answers, they undertook a 6-year study to uncover the origins of what they consider to be creative and often disruptive industries. And the result of that research was they identified 5 discovery skills that they felt allowed them to distinguish the most creative executives, which they listed as associating, questioning, observing, experimenting, and networking. But even more, they developed a set of working hypotheses that allowed them to put into a 3P framework that they felt told them the DNA of an innovative organization, which sure enough was people, process, and philosophy. And I guess what I'm trying to say is today we're joined on stage by 3 of RPAG's most innovative organizations to learn about their people, their process, and their philosophies. So please welcome me in introducing our panelists for today. Starting here on the left, we have Mr. Bryce Sowich. Bryce is partner and director of qualified retirement plans with IFAM Capital by way of Colorado. We have Renee White, director of retirement plan services with Epstein Financial, which is part of Hub, by way of Massachusetts. And then we have FlexPath's very own Jonathan Coombs, locally based, and a resource today to share some of what we've done on our NFP side of the business, as well as some of what other RPAG advisors have shared with us in preparation for our discussion today. So thank you all for taking the opportunity to be here today. Now, in the theme of today's discussion, keep your business moving forward, what I wanted to do was apply that working hypothesis that Hal Gregerson and Jeffrey Dyer talked about in their book, again, People, Process, Philosophy, to 4 quotes that stood out to me from individuals that I consider to be somewhat titans of the industry. And with that, we have Warren Buffett, we have Michael Porter, who is a professor at the Harvard Business School, we have John Wooden. You know, at RPAG, we love our Bruins here. As well as, lastly, we have Michael Scott, perhaps the man who needs no introduction. So the first quote that really grabbed my attention from Warren Buffett, and typically when you see him giving advice to small business owners, he gives the advice of, don't just satisfy your customer, it's important that you delight them. So Bryce, I wanted to start off by just asking you, how is IFAM working within this framework with your clients?
Yeah, great question. I think it's really important, especially over the last 2 years, to meet clients where you can. A lot of Zoom meetings, you need to deliver your services sometimes remotely. And we had a lot of conversations with our clients about how to do that. One of the things that we worked on over the last couple of years is really moving people from 321 over to 338. And what clients have been telling us is they have a lot going on in their businesses, and they want things taken off of their plate, and that includes services in the 401k plan. So we really moved to more 338 in the last year. It's easier for us as we work administratively in our office. We don't have to track down votes. If we have a fund change between reviews, we don't have to track down votes for committee members. So we're really trying to lighten the load for most clients and make it easier for them, and we found that 338 has really helped with that.
Wonderful. And part of what Bryce and I spoke about prior to this is by leveraging some of the CITs that RPAG's made available, right? That has a certain additional level of 338 protection where our investment committee serves as a fiduciary at the fund level. So as changes do come up, right, it does make some of that process even easier. No fund change notices are being required to send out, as well as taking some of that additional protection off your plate. Thank you, Bryce.
Yeah.
Renee, can I ask you the same question in terms of don't just satisfy your customer, delight them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think over the past year and a half, people have really been struggling. There's been a big need for human connection, just on a personal level. Everybody's been impacted in some way. And so kind of setting the business aside in terms of not having our conversations be so much about business, we really set out to make more personal connections with our clients. So last March in 2020, our office was shut down. We couldn't go physically into the office for a period of about 9 weeks. And so we took those 9 weeks to pick up the phone and, we set a goal to do it in those 9 weeks. It took a little bit longer. But to pick up the phone and personally call every client, the retirement plan clients, our individual wealth management clients, and have a conversation that was just centered about how are you doing? People were just really wanting to talk. A lot of people were feeling isolated. And so, we made that effort. And that's something that doesn't just necessarily have to be during, a 9-week period when an office is shut down, but something that could be done every year, setting aside a half hour or an hour of a day to just pick up the phone and work on making personal connections with clients. Service, in general, I feel like customer service, not here, but in other industries and other places, customer service has kind of gone a little bit downhill. And so Jesse's talked a lot about, raising the bar, going above and beyond. That's kind of been an underlying theme here today. And I would say we really have an opportunity to do that by focusing on the personal connections we have with our clients.
Thank you. And Renee shared a story with us as we were preparing for this that a tree blew through her house, and we had to unfortunately postpone and cancel the call, but the service of that organization, right, who covered the insurance on your house was part of what, gave you some of that validation as well.
Yeah, I will say,
go ahead.
During that same period, the only phone call I got from anybody I work with was the insurance company that does my home and auto. And like I said, when the tree fell, it was, go right to them. They took care of it. I knew that they were going to be on top of it. They were the only ones that personally reached out to me. And so hopefully we were that one call or that impact on our clients.
And Mr. Coombs?
It's so nice sorry, bad habit there. It's a pleasure to see you. I know it's been said a lot, but it is just so nice to see your faces. I've really missed this. In compiling results from many of you as well as on the NFP side, one of the common themes that I noticed really centered around 3 factors or an approach for success to generate this level of client satisfaction. And those 3 factors were the approach of going deeper, wider, and with eyes and ears wide open. So what do I mean by that specifically? By deeper, I think we can all agree we're not likely going to delight anyone by talking about how our investment due diligence process, secret sauce, is superior. Of course, we can talk about that, and we do believe it is in fact superior. But to delight a client, here, for example, we're talking about something like going deeper would represent not only reviewing and having a thorough understanding of the terms of the plan document, but also proactively following up with the operations team to see if they are in fact following said terms. In other words, identifying potential pain points in the plan before they become painful. And then, if necessary, having a solution in place to solve for it. This is obviously also very powerful in a prospecting setting. Actually, on the NFP side, one of the perennial top salespeople is the very epitome of applying this process to perfection and is likely a very major catalyst in why she is so incredibly successful. By wider, here we're talking about going beyond just the health of the retirement plan. Gain a thorough understanding of the client's corporate goals and objectives. Maybe that's something where they're focused on growth or trying to attract and or retain key talent. Maybe that might require some type of non-qual executive benefits type solution. Well, if that falls outside your area of expertise, of course, you can widen that area of expertise, or easier, partner with someone who can help. Form a strategic alliance of industry experts that allow you to cast a wider net that makes you a bigger center of influence for your clients. And then finally, eyes and ears wide open simply refers to the idea of always being ready to respond based on what you hear and see. Said differently, going into any type of interaction with an inflexible game plan puts you at risk of presenting a solution for a problem that client may not have. Eyes and ears wide open is just that gentle reminder to ensure the client is always heard, feels understood, and ultimately, hopefully, is delighted.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the second quote that stood out to me is from Michael Porter. Michael's a professor at Harvard Business School, and the advice that he gave was, you need to be able to say why you're different, why you're adding value, and why you're procuring something special that the client needs. Right? All of us in this room want to avoid from being commoditized and competing just on price alone. Right? It's important or crucial, really, to be able to reiterate your value. So Bryce, can I ask you just to answer that question for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I really feel like our business is changing very quickly. Nick and Vince last night spoke very well about it, looking forward, some predictions. And we had the Secure Act in December of 2019, and right before COVID hit. And I remember sitting in my office shortly after thinking about multiple employer plans and remembering a decade or so ago when they were allowed and they were kind of a mess. And I was thinking, is this an opportunity or is this a threat? And as I sat there, I thought more about it, and I decided it's probably either one, depending on how you look at it. I've seen predictions for 75% of plans under $10 million will be in multiple employer plans in the next 10 years. Whether that's true or not is yet to be seen, but First thing I did is I suck out a 402A fiduciary, had them audit our business practices, look at how we run plans, everything that we do. We ended up talking about structure of multiple employer plans, and we ended up offering them to clients last year. And clients loved it. They like paying less, right? They always do. They like offloading services. They like the ability to have 4 different fiduciaries within their plan. There's a 402A fiduciary, 316, 338, and then another 338 with the FlexPath portfolios. So this is something that's really been a business driver for us over the past year. And there's enough structures out there now that you can find them that fit your practice and your personality and your clients. So I'd encourage people to do that. And most recently talking to a client of ours who's also a TPA, and she asked me the same question. She said, Bryce, is this a threat or is this an opportunity? And I said, I could be either one. And they haven't come on board yet with offering multiple employer plans to their clients, but it's something that clients haven't heard about. Fair warning, auditors really haven't heard about it, don't really know what they are yet, but they've been very well received by our clients.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bryce. And I think, questions on that topic as well, certainly contact Bryce today during happy hour. Renee, can I have you answer the same question, please?
Yeah, so one thing that we were noticing just over time, what we were doing within our own practice is we were focused on business owners when we were doing due diligence meetings, plan reviews, and we were focused on participants. But one thing that was kind of lacking was that HR, payroll, plan admin piece. They're not always included in those meetings, and those meetings don't always cover what their role is. So we found that a lot of times your payroll people, your HR people are just kind of thrown into this role that they're supposed to administer the 401k plan for their business. So recognizing that we were getting a lot of the same questions from those contacts, they were having, or some of the same errors or things were coming up with some of our plans, we created a series called Coffee and K Plans, and it was an educational series geared towards our plan administrators. And once a month, we would send an invite out to all of our plan administrators, HR, payroll, the business owners as well, and invite them to our office for bagels and coffee. This was pre-COVID. We had to go virtual for a bit, and now we're just on a little bit of a pause. But we would invite them to our office. So it was something that was very inexpensive, maybe $20 a month for us to just buy bagels, cream cheese, coffee, and have a conversation about something that was relevant to them. That we started with the basics of a 401k plan. What's what, who's who, what's the role of a TPA, what are the different plan documents you need to know about. There are a lot of things that they don't come to that role already knowing. So that was really the goal of that educational series. When there were things that we didn't know about, we brought in, or not know about, but brought in guest speakers to talk about payroll integration. We had a payroll company come in. Matt Giovanazzo came up and talked about target date funds. So we brought in outside speakers as well. And what we found was not only did it give us a chance to provide them with education, but they almost formed their own little network getting to talk to each other in the same role within our clients. And for those that didn't show up, it was just one more touch that we had on them because they knew that at least it was available even if they didn't take advantage of it.
And I love the name, Coffee and K Plans. Jonathan, how about you?
Yes, so here, again, a very, very common theme that popped up over and over again was the fact that differentiation really begins with a company's culture. One that's willing to be an industry innovator and not simply limited to traditional or basic services. I think Jesse touched on this yesterday, but in case you missed it, we actually on the NFP side have this pyramid of services we like to show. And the bottom tiers of that are really just table stakes. It's funds, fees, fiduciaries, documentation, vendor management. In other words, I don't know how else to say it, it's white noise. It's those levels above it that really set us apart. Things like identifying problems, coming up with creative solutions for those problems, then leveraging the collective resources and scale of really all of RPAG to come up with creative solutions and services that ultimately enhance outcomes. And then present those unique services and solutions by showing them the how and why you do things as opposed to simply the what. Perfect example of this has to do with what's been talked about already a little bit today, but specifically having a dedicated service item of qualifying the QDIA by running a plan-specific suitability analysis. A documented, prudent process delivered on a regular basis to ensure the plan's asset allocation solution was not simply selected by looking at generic industry data, or perhaps worse, because it happened to be low cost. And then, if the marketplace fails or falls short in addressing the unique needs of the individual, as Matt and Kellen just talked about, we are all part of an organization that was willing to solve for that need. We're willing to disrupt the industry and come up with these very participant-tailored custom asset allocation solutions. And then the other area that's a great example has to do with this never-ending conversation around low fees, which, as Alex mentioned, puts us all at risk of really commoditizing every aspect of our business. An alternative, have a dedicated service item of providing guidance on efficient menu design and manager optimization. So we, like many others, have a great way of identifying consistently skillful money managers, but that's where most people stop. We all take it one step further by going to those money managers, negotiating access to their strategies at significant cost reductions, which ultimately allows us to still talk about lowering fees, but doing so by demonstrating value and perhaps justifying not being the lowest cost advisor option.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. Coach John Wooden, I know, again, a lot of UCLA love down here when you're in Southern California. He's famously quoted as saying, you need to be alert, right? Be constantly observing, stay open-minded, be eager to learn, be eager to improve. Jonathan, I'm going to come back to you on this one. Can you talk to some of the points that this really resonates with you?
Yes, so on this one, definitely the theme revolved around the dangers of maintaining the status quo, or as I like to put it, maintaining a Trojan horse of safety. In this ever-changing and unpredictable world we live in, this is especially true as it relates to visibility and viability. If you think back, 15, 10, maybe even 5 years ago, I'm not so sure that your digital footprint would have impacted whether or not somebody was going to hire you as an advisor. Today, I can't imagine anybody is going to hire an advisor without first consulting with Google to see what they have to say. And so a potential solution here is actually, and this is really more of just a roadmap, a specific example of a roadmap that could be expanded upon, but the RPAG Custom Solutions team put together something we call a breadcrumb email campaign that was specifically designed to leverage Larkspur, which you all have, in an email prospecting campaign. And the goal here was to make deposits of information over time to help build credibility with a prospect before ever asking for a call or meeting. Hopefully these breadcrumb emails uncovered a potential pain point that the advisor then, now seeing you as a true thought leader and valuable resource, proactively reaches out to you for guidance. So again, that's a specific example, though, that could absolutely be expanded. The more places, so LinkedIn, your company website, virtual webinars, Twitter, you name it, the more places you're putting out these breadcrumbs, the higher your visibility, and of course, the higher your search engine optimization. And then the broader the content in these breadcrumbs, the better your viability as a true thought leader.
Thank you, Jonathan. Renee, perhaps no group more visible than you and Charlie, the 401k coach who we all remember. I think you have a different example, though, of being alert that I hope you could share with us.
Yeah, so this was a few years ago, and I don't remember the exact quote, and I don't remember where it came from, but Charlie had come to us at one of our annual company-wide meetings and was talking about expanding the scope of what you are willing to take into account and discover for discovery's sake. Basically, don't do something just because that's the way it's always been done. Be willing to try new things. Be willing to step out of the box. Be creative. And that's just really an office culture that we have, that Charlie has. And he's extremely creative, far more creative than anybody I've ever worked with before. But he lets us be creative as well, lets us try new things, questions us if we're doing something, are you doing this just because it's always the way that it's been done? So one example of something that we did this past year to do a little bit differently was we took advantage of a lot of things moving online and a lot of meetings on Zoom, and decided to work smarter and not harder. And so we would kind of consolidate some of our meetings and do, okay, we're going to have a website demonstration for participants that all use the same record keeper. And so we would invite them to a Zoom meeting and have a specific record keeper talk about a website demonstration. Something that I think we're going to have to set up is do that with all of our plans that use FlexPath. Invite the participants for all of those plans to come on board and have someone from the FlexPath team talk about their target date funds. So we've been able to not just do plan by plan meetings, but do by something else that they have in common. So we've been able to kind of step outside where we were a little bit.
I love it. And Renee shared with me earlier that this model came as a result of someone leaving, right? And you, as a result, in turn, having to cover more from a service standpoint. So you had to be creative in terms of how you can scale what you've done. And I think that's absolutely a creative situation that I really hadn't heard of before. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Bryce, how about yourself?
Yeah, I thought Renee's answer was great to that. Within our group, however, sometimes creativeness happens by accident or by necessity. And by that, I mean we had 3 strong referral sources retire here in the last year and a half. One was a CEO of a medical group, one was a state senator in South Dakota, and one was a CPA for the largest accounting firm in Wyoming. And we got together as partners and said, what are we going to do about this? You think they'd be interested in some type of role within our firm? So ultimately what we did is we approached them about being solicitors. And there are specific rules around it, which my compliance team handles, thankfully for us. But it allowed them to maintain their networks. And as you know, some people don't retire well. If they've worked hard their whole career, they want some type of professional fulfillment. So they're working, some are working a lot, some aren't. We had one that's very successful in finding retirement plans in South Dakota. But it was a structure that allowed us to maintain that network, keep those referral sources, and not lose them. And it allowed the solicitors to still be involved to whatever extent they wanted to.
Love it. And last, Titan of industry, Mr. Michael Scott. Right. I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do. Right? Have we been there? Bryce, can you share a little bit with us on this quote?
Yes, I can relate to Michael quite a bit in a lot of situations. Who here has gotten a no from people? We get no's all the time in our business. And something I really try to do, we work really hard to get in front of clients, right? It's difficult to get in front of new clients, and sometimes we get a no. And what I really wanted to do is be purposeful about staying in front of them. And I use the RPAG newsletters. We have bulletins from IFAM that we send out. LinkedIn is great for this. And I had a recent example, well, not really recent, 7 years ago, a CEO of a medical group in Fort Collins, Colorado, had us come in and look at their plan. Direct provider, no fiduciary standards at all. We looked at it, educated them, did a bunch of pro bono work. They said no. 7 years later, after sending him the newsletters, LinkedIn, staying in contact, he called me out of the blue. He's at a new group. He said, I remember what you did, and we now have a $20 million opportunity. So, lead times are long in the 401k world, not always 7 years. But my goal is to stay top of mind when that decision is going to possibly be a yes. They're trying to make that decision again.
Wonderful. And another resource for that would be some of the breadcrumb emails that Jonathan mentioned, just a way to kind of drip on your clients. Renee, how about you with Mr. Michael Scott here?
I think this quote kind of summarizes the red flag training that has come up a little bit,
yes.
Which is basically, for those of you that aren't familiar with it or haven't been to one of the red flag trainings, it talks about basically meeting a client where they're at. We might think that they're at a certain point and go in with a solution to a problem that they don't feel is a problem or they don't feel is the biggest problem. And so just an example of something that we've done that kind of fits into that is with the RFPs, with the provider analysis. I know exactly what to do. I know the process. I know how to go into the system. I know how to run it. I know how to evaluate all of it and create a great presentation. But that's not what they're looking for. Or that's not what is front of mind for them. That's not the biggest issue they think it is. So I might spend all this time doing a presentation or working on something that isn't really relevant to where they're at. So what we started doing is sending out just a quick survey to the plans that are due for an RFP, due for a vendor benchmark, and see exactly what they're looking for. What are the biggest pain points that they have with their plan? What are they the happiest with? What do they wish they could change? And then RPAG has been so kind enough to have some different options within the provider analysis to do more simple versions or more complex versions. So it's really been a time saver to be able to really kind of create that based on what the client is looking for.
Wonderful. And Jonathan, I think you have an example for us from someone on the NFP side of the business going
I do,
and
I do, and I think we can all, I'm sure, relate to this quote in a number of ways after the past 19 months we've all been through. But I want to focus on this through the lens of seeing this as a potential problem solver. So many great responses, but the one that Alex is mentioning really resonated well with me in a number of ways. And one in particular is the fact that it actually follows one of my personal mantras, which I hope you don't mind me sharing, which is life is not about what happens to you, but rather the attitude and determination with which you respond. We know challenging times present opportunity for growth, and this advisor did exactly that. So having found themselves with a little extra time on their hand during the early stages of the pandemic, this advisor took it upon themselves to expand their horizons of knowledge beyond just retirement plans, and with the goal of hopefully becoming more aware of executive benefit non-qual type solutions. The key word there, become aware. So having just recently won a nonprofit plan, or the retirement plan for a nonprofit that is a 501c3, the advisor later learned that this client was really looking to add some type of executive bonus program. Well, in their research to expand their knowledge, they stumbled upon an explanation of loan regime split dollar program that happened to have significant positive tax implications amongst many other benefits. Long story short, this advisor consulted with an attorney, brought in a partner who was a subject matter expert, and later found that this program could be funded by pulling money from the endowment. So they turned this executive bonus program into something the endowment could invest in. And because it's a nonprofit, they get all their money back plus interest. The end result, this advisor was able to save the client a significant amount of money. The key individuals were able to achieve their goal of increasing their revenue. The advisor enhanced his revenue. And this advisor ended up with a client who is basically willing to work with them in any capacity going forward. And with the Aons of the world coming down market, this is the perfect mindset of someone who is going to be viable and successful long into the future.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us, Jonathan. You know, in the theme of football starting this week, that's a way that John Harbaugh gets paid, right? A lot of universities or your credit unions in the not-for-profit space, that might be an example of something you want to look to. And there's certainly resources within RPAG and via your sponsors here today. I wanted to close just really quickly with one of the quotes from that book that I mentioned earlier, and it's from Jeff Bezos. He's quoted saying, "If you believe the world can change, then it's not a stretch to believe that you can be a part of it." Today we heard a lot of great insight from our panelists today. Again, thank you for sharing that with us. And I think as a takeaway, it's important to understand that as RPAG advisors, you're already at the top of what it is that we do within the industry, right? We're not saying revamp anything that you're doing today, but look for small tweaks that could perhaps result in big impacts, and think about how much better that can make all of us. That's all. Thank you guys so much.
Please welcome to the stage our diversity and inclusion panel, featuring Julie Graham from RPAG, joined by Nancy Melinda, Miriam Lewis, and Mike James.
Hello, great to see everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you. I have the pleasure of introducing you to some very special guests joining us today for the first time here at the conference. First, I want to introduce you to Miriam Lewis. Miriam is the Chief Inclusion Officer at Principal, and she's had that role for a few years, and prior to that, she worked and headed up diversity and inclusion at the Clorox companies. We're also joined by Nancy Melinda. Nancy is the Executive Director of Mattel Children's Foundation and Corporate Philanthropy. So she brings a great perspective in just advancing those efforts, and then how we can focus our strategy around company alignment and the corporate philosophy. And of course, we have Mike James. Many of you may know Mike James, or MJ, as we fondly refer to him. He is the Executive VP, Head of Individual Solutions for NFP. He advances that strategy globally, and he also last year was appointed as a special advisor to NFP's board of directors around issues of race, learning, and advancing our diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Welcome.
Yeah.
We are thrilled to have you here. I know your time is very valuable. To set the stage as we think about this topic, it's a very broad and deep topic. We're going to focus on how do we find talent? How do we shift the focus of our industry to look more like the communities where we work and where the clients we work with and where we live and serve in the communities. So most job seekers, or more than 2/3 today, have stated that workplace diversity is really important to them as they look for new opportunities. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The Caucasian population in 1980 was over 80%, and today is 60%. So in 40 years' time, our population is shifting. It is shifting, it's changing, and that is not going to change. It's going to keep continuing in that direction. So we're really at a point where you can see over the next 20 years, 20 to 25, we're at a point where there will no longer be a single racial majority. So how do we look different as an industry? How do we serve the participants and the clients that we work with and the communities that we're in? So we want to have those thoughts in your minds as we start our conversation today and think about these strategies that we have. And I really want to direct my first question to MJ. Diversity, equity, inclusion as a strategy, is that the right strategy? And how does it feel to you as a person of color in that?
Well, thanks for asking that question. Hello, everybody. Hello. Are you all there? All right, just making sure. First, let me just thank you all for having us. I'm humbled, coming off of 2020 to have this many people in one room. It was a little bit of culture shock for me. I hadn't been in a ballroom with a few hundred people in a while, so I had to step back out and collect myself. But I'm in good shape now. Let me tell you this is my opinion. We're in this amazing generational movement. The acronyms DE&I, you hear them all the time. They bring up all kinds of feelings. They make you anxious. They make you worry about being too vulnerable at the wrong time. But I'm here to tell you it's very important that you take this generational movement very seriously. You're all fierce and amazing entrepreneurs. You fight through a plethora of objections and challenges to give your clients the best solutions that you possibly can find. The thing that's changing is that these clients are now going to start asking you about where your moral fiber is, where your values are, how you feel about this generational movement. My advice to you is you need to have an authentic answer. As a person of color, this DE&I movement is focused on people like myself, individuals who come from minority groups, females, folks that have different social and economic models that aren't mainstream. And so sometimes you feel like, I don't need a charity. I don't need some sort of gift. I'm as gifted and as talented as anyone else. But the reality is you need to have a light shining on people that don't have the same path, don't have the same framework, don't have the same opportunities as many of you. And your businesses will be better served by having an awareness and a conscience about how to source talent, how to retain talent, how to bring diverse individuals and perspectives to the table for your advantage. and for your benefit. So that's a long-winded answer, but I'm just here to tell you I'm excited about this. I'm excited to be in front of you, kind of sharing my personal views and opinions. I do think they line up with NFP, or else I wouldn't be up here. So anyhow, that's my answer. Thanks for the first question.
Thank you. Miriam, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I do, and again, thanks for being here. It's such a privilege to see everyone and not be behind a Zoom screen finally, so I'm glad to be here. Let me start with people of color, right? So people of color, I get questions around that all the time. Who are people of color? And let's not assume that everyone knows. It's non-white. If you are other than white, you are considered a person of color. And so for me in this journey, I think that it's important to make sure that we are thinking about DE&I in every facet of our business. So if I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So I believe that inclusion is our strategy. Diversity, equity, innovation, retention, business growth are all outcomes of an inclusive environment. So when we think about inclusion, we think about inclusion from the standpoint of our people processes and our business processes. So if we think about people, are we inclusive on the recruiting side? Are we inclusive in retaining talent? And then we think about it from the business perspective, are we inclusive in our supplier diversity practices? And then when we think about how we bring all this together, it's really about how do we get the very most out of each and every one of our employees in this inclusive environment so that they can thrive. So it's really a business opportunity, it's a growth opportunity, and if we're not thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, then we're missing a great opportunity for business growth.
Absolutely.
Well
Thank
said.
you for sharing that. Yeah. And Nancy, what you do with Mattel and the philanthropy side of it, how do you see that enhancing the diversity, recruitment, and finding talent?
Yes, thank you for having me here. Thank you for inviting a toy manufacturer into your world. I appreciate being here. This is the first conference that I have been at since the pandemic, so this is feeling wonderful. And I wanted to play really quickly off of Miriam's last comment. It's also about our strategy then into the community. And so it's our people and our strategy, but also that can flow back into the community, and that's the work that I do at Mattel. And lately, really more than ever since the last few years, we have been integrating our philanthropy and our corporate goals within how we serve the community directly in with our talent management and our recruitment, working very closely with the groups at Mattel that do this, because I think it's important to restructure our giving and our funding to represent the talent that we're trying to recruit and then mirror that out into the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And Miriam, just kind of in your role, what are you seeing any new or different in terms of recruitment and finding that talent?
Yes, so I know I'm from Principal, which is a fairly large organization with 18,000 employees. But some of the practices that I'll share with you that we're doing, they're very relevant for businesses with even 3 and 5 people because it's probably even more critical. So one of the things we're doing on the recruiting side is that we are sourcing talent in advance of need. We're not waiting until we get a requisition. People are already well tasked, so we have what we're called a green room concept, and we meet with prospective clients about quarterly, and to just draw interest in our company, to share, and then when we have an opening, we call them back at that time to interview and ask them to apply for the role as well, more formally. But it's really about the same thing we do in our businesses with retirements, right? We're saving in advance of the need, and we have to treat talent in that exact same way. The other thing that we're doing is that we're requiring diverse candidate slates. So we're making sure that we have a pool of diverse candidates to select from. There's great research that shows that if you have 2 or more diverse candidates, then you're 79% more likely to hire a candidate. So we're not putting the pressure on the back end of the process, on the hiring, we're putting it on the front end, because if you have the candidates, then you have an opportunity to pursue that. And then lastly, we also require diverse interview panels. And with the diverse interview panels, sometimes our teams don't have someone diverse on the team, but there's someone within the company that you can call on to help. Maybe you go outside of your company so that you can get different perspectives on candidates to make sure that you are really considering all skill sets. And you're doing this because I think MJ hit it earlier when he said that it's really important for our customers for us to make sure that they are dealing with diverse employees and have that diversity of thought that is so important. So those are the three things, Julie, that I would offer when attracting new talent to the organization.
Is there any particular sources you find are helpful?
There are quite a few sources, and there are some crowded sources too right now as well. So I will tell you about Management Leadership for Tomorrow. They're based out of New York City. Management Leadership for Tomorrow they're based on racially diverse talent. They groom them beginning in their sophomore year of high school. I like to say they have candidates who are corporate America ready. And they've done all of the heavy lifting, which is what you need, right, into your businesses. You don't have a lot of time to teach some of the basics. So I would definitely offer that. Another source would also be for the, the Network of Executive Leaders. Network of Executive Women, I should say, and it's new for the acronym, and that is another great source for talent.
Great, thank you so much. MJ, I'm going to direct this one back to you because I know your story a little bit more, and I'd love for you to share that framework that kind of brought you through your career path, because I think it's important for us to learn how we can give into people and invest our time and help to pull somebody along.
Sure. Boy, my age is starting to show. So 30 years ago, I got invited into an internship program, which was targeting diverse individuals from the city of Boston. And, I didn't think much of it because I came from a community where, my parents, my older siblings, they just wanted me to do something productive, get a job and, stay out of trouble. And so I got introduced to this diversity internship program at John Hancock, and I got into the life insurance business as a result of that in 1991. Changed my life. I think when we talk about programs and framework, you can look at it in a way that makes you think that it is a preferred path or there's some sort of accelerated track. But as a person that actually engaged in that framework, you worked double hard. You focused even more to make sure that people understood that you were taking it seriously and this wasn't some sort of charity. I'm really proud of that framework. That framework just housed a couple dozen young individuals back in 1991. I go back every summer and speak to over 700 students in the same program now. So exponentially, they don't even call it a diversity internship program anymore. They call it the MLK Scholars Program. So they've even changed the vernacular and the perception of what the program is. When you're in a program, and this is my unsolicited advice. Programs that are targeted to certain people, the people that they're targeted to have they feel something. They're thinking something. And most of the time, they're thinking, what are they thinking I'm getting out of this that I don't deserve? That's normally the perspective of someone in a program that's targeting them. So you got to overcome that before you actually can go into the program and actually perform and then get positioned for something that could change your life. So I'm living proof that it did change my life. My daughter, who has a master's degree, went through the same program several decades later, and she's doing well. My son is interning inside of NFP, has been with our health division, is now with the life insurance division, and hopefully we'll see sports and entertainment. I'm not doing anything with him that I wouldn't do with a white colleague's child or individual, a young person that I get introduced to. But the framework is really, really important. And if you take anything away from that, there's something you can do right now if you're not attached to any kind of framework. If you haven't thought about a pipeline to bring young people into the business, into your business, you can do that. There's so many places to go for resources and information. At NFP, we source candidates. We probably don't have enough places to put them. We'd be happy to share some of those with you. So just bringing it full circle, I think it's all about, you know, being deliberate around change.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. You know, just kind of to tie into that, Miriam, I think that is a big part of retention as well. So if you're bringing in talent, you have the framework there, and you build that as in your company. Like, how are you doing anything new and different in today's world with the last few years, as far as how are you keeping that talent, you know, in the house?
Yeah, that's really important. And as I was listening to the last panel discussion, it made me think about that people pillar and how important it is. So if we think about retaining people, people really care about three things in your workplace. They care about inclusion, they care about flexibility, and they care about purpose. And if we can hit those three vectors, we can really make an impact. So from an inclusion standpoint, we've been really intentional about unconscious bias training in our workplace. And when you think about unconscious bias training, it's not a heavy cost around it. And the awareness is the first part of it, but learning how to mitigate bias when it really counts most so that we can make more confident decisions is extremely important. So if you have a workplace of, say, 5 people, the Neuro Leadership Institute does a fantastic job of helping leaders and employees not only get awareness and a nice framework around what unconscious biases are, but also teach us how to mitigate them. And then I would say what's also important is around purpose. We do some very purposeful work in this industry, right? So we help people when it matters most. Leading with purpose and talking about our purpose more and more to our employees is a retention play. They want to help people. This is the generational play, if you will. So and then flexibility. Sometimes we think, okay, we may not be able to be flexible, but we have to really understand through one-on-one conversations, what does flexibility mean to each and every person? It may mean for one person, I need to take my lunch at 11 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock. It may not be some real big hairy thing, but having those one-on-one conversations is so important. Many times we have exit conversations with employees, and we're learning so much in exit conversations, but this framework around purpose, around inclusion and flexibility, it allows for us to have stay conversations. What's important for you to stay with me as an employee? So I think that's what's extremely important, and how we play that out with our employees, making sure that they're getting what they need. And inclusion, purpose, and flexibility meets the basic needs of employees of today.
MJ or Nancy, have anything else you'd like to add to what Miriam just shared?
Yeah,
no,
go
you
first.
know I got a little something.
Same here.
I always got something
I'm like,
ready to go. She's like, all right, go ahead, MJ. I can feel it. Got something to say. I'll also say this, because we're not going to get a lot of time with you outside of this. Again, back to DE&I and this generational movement that we're all in. It does take each of us to get a little bit vulnerable. There's no doubt that everyone in this room has to face the fact that our country has a pretty well-documented racial past. And so anytime you get into this dialogue, this conversation, this desire to impact society in a positive way, it's challenging. It's a little bit tense. Makes you a little bit anxious. I'm living proof that you have to trust that being vulnerable in the right setting will allow you to grow in such a special way. You know, last year I grew up in a major way. You couldn't get away from racial and social injustice. It was in every medium. You couldn't move. We're in COVID. You're stuck at home. You're saying, why can't we escape this cycle? Well, you can't escape it because we got to do something about it. It's pretty bad. But I'm here to tell you that, organizations are doing such amazing work. They're providing safe places to self-enrich and self-study and understand history so that you have perspective when you take your first step, whatever it is. And the only advice I'd give you is when you learn something new, when you experience something that has a positive impact on you or your business under this new generational movement, share it with somebody you love. Share it with somebody you care about. Could be your partner, could be a colleague, could be a family member, could be somebody that you're mentoring. I think that's where we get to magnify the best of who we are. We got to go through this together as a society. It needs to be dealt with. People need to have framework. There needs to be a better path. No free passes. Earn your way. But it'll be good for everybody. But my advice to you is you got to get a little bit vulnerable in order to really experience true growth.
I'll echo what MJ just said as well. And, fear is real. And the acronym for fear that I love is that it's false evidence appearing real, because most of the things that we fear really never take place. And I know it's fearful sometimes because we live in a cancel culture, but relationships really transcends that. So if you form those relationships and those human connections with people, you won't experience some of the things that are polarized across the different TV stations. And the last thing I would add is around that vulnerability piece and making sure that we're having those conversations. One of the steps we've taken at Principal, we call them inclusion pods. And leaders meet on a monthly basis in teams of 4 to 6 people. And they really talk about current events. They talk about intersectionality. They talk about microaggressions. And we're just learning together because we realize that people need to be in a safe space to have these conversations. And then when we show back up to our broader teams, then we're more educated around these things and are able to support people through these very difficult times. And lastly, what I would say is that we really and truly believe that leaders have to be as fluent in diversity, equity, and inclusion as they're in their business. So we're providing these opportunities for leaders to be upskilled.
Nancy?
Yeah, now more than ever, I think leadership where I am working is dialed in. And my work has become, a large focus of what doing business is. It's not only showing up for our diverse workforce, but also playing a huge part in our community. A really important part of our recruitment and recruitment of a diverse workforce is to make sure when we bring those employees into the company that they are able to be their authentic self. And not only within the company, but it's my job to be able to make sure that I am also giving them opportunities to represent their authentic self in their community and all of our giving back initiatives. And I bet there's many of you here in the room that you're working with large partners or organizations and companies that have specific missions in giving back. And it would be, I think an amazing part of your work is to connect with them on their philanthropic initiatives, talking to them about what is important to them and how that can increase kind of the diversity that you have within your hiring processes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just learned so much. I feel like we could keep going and going. I love hearing from all of you, and I feel like each topic or each question I learn more and more. But just to give us some takeaways, and I've heard several just in listening that you've given us some good action steps already. But if you could kind of just sum up, like how do we move from having a conversation about this to actually taking action? Like we need to actually get out of our comfort zone and take action. So can you give us maybe just one quick idea or one statement that would say, do this one step as maybe your next step to take initiative around diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Sure, so I'll start, and I'll start with press the forward button. I mean, this conference is all around forward, so if you press the forward button, think about inclusion. And when you're making your next business decision, ask the question, what's missing? Who am I not thinking about? Who's not at the table for this discussion? And then go out and seek another perspective.
Love that.
That's great. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's really good. And I am always about collaboration. So playing back on, how I mentioned, reach out to others. If your organization is small and you don't have, a group that works on philanthropic initiatives within your company, reach out and see if there's ways to get involved in the community in a diverse way. And also, we were talking earlier, RPAG seems to be such an amazing resource for all of you. I had some conversations last night and really impressed with the type of resources and all of the different programs, and thought, wouldn't it be amazing in the future if they were also able to offer you a resource where you could all collaborate together, come together over a community initiative and need, and support one another. That leads into more of this forward-thinking DE&I effectiveness within your work.
Yeah, well said. I'd say this is a team sport. You don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
There's lots of great resources, people, and framework, and that's prevalent today. And I think, like anything else, like you're investing your time to be here at the RPAG Forward Conference, you're investing in your business, you're investing in your current clients, future clients. I would look at this DE&I generational window we're in as an investment in your futures. And do what you would normally do. Step back a little bit, take a step, self-enrich, read something, watch something, reach out to somebody that has some information that could help you, and take a step. This, without it, I can assure you there's two paths. One path is we forget about DE&I, we're not talking about it because it becomes who we are. It becomes the way we do business, the way we source, the way we operate, the way we grow. Or it fails miserably and we take several steps backwards and we create more division, more divide, more friction. So I'm so thankful to just share kind of my personal views. There's no notes, there's no slides, just telling you what I feel in my heart about where we all are. I'm really proud of RPAG, Nick and Vince and the whole team. This is a world-class organization. You all should be very thankful to be in the midst of this type of framework for your business. I'm humbled to be a part of this panel with these amazing leaders. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for educating us and teaching us and expanding our perspectives. So I just appreciate you traveling far and spending the time with us today. We just thank you for the opportunity and the knowledge and the experiences that you share with us today. And I hope everyone has an idea written down that they're able to move forward with and take action. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Julie, Miriam, Nancy, and MJ. Lots of great insights there. And throughout the rest of the last day and a half, there's not just been great insights, there's been great strategic thinking on how to grow your business. There's been amazing tactical approaches on how to take many of the solutions that you have at your fingertips to grow and sell. And so take it all together, right? There's a lot there. We can try to consume it. I think the best thing is reach out to someone on the RPAG team, whether it's about the sales and marketing approach or custom solutions or even just using the portal. Reach out and we'll help distill all the stuff here. The slides will be available, as I said, but there's a lot there. You're not going to take it all in and consume it all. So try to take that one takeaway from whatever that session might be that connects with you. Kind of pass this here. Going out to lunch. Lunch is in the courtyard, will be served immediately. I'm always the last person before a meal or drink, so I'm sorry about that. But we'll be having lunch until 1 p.m. After lunch, there are wonderful breakout sessions, amazing content and thought leadership from all of our great partners. 3 tracks to choose from. One track will be in here in the main ballroom. The other 2 will be at the Pacific Promenade Room. If you have not figured out the app, there are 2 toggles on the app. One says My Schedule, and the other says All Sessions. And so go to All Sessions, and you'll see all the options, and you can add which ones to your schedule, and it'll tell you which location, the speaker, the bio, from which organization and where. And if you have any questions, just check out the registration desk, and we'll help you out. Here's some of the great topics. Again, ESG, guaranteed income, women in retirement, DB plans, 457. The list goes on and on, but a lot of really good information. I've been given word. Thank you all for going out during the break and donating. We're over $15,000 in donations. We're trying to get to 30. So at this evening at the networking event, please put your donations in. You can win a great prize, and you're also supporting a wonderful organization. As a reminder, there's a 25-cent match on the dollar, so our organization and company will be providing back towards that. Monday evening, today, the schedule after the breakout sessions, 4:30 through the wee hours of the night, we're having our backyard barbecue event, charity cornhole. I hear there's another couple slots open for the 2-person teams, so sign up for that. That's at 4:30 to 9, sponsored and thank you by our partners at Wilmington Trust. We'll have the Monday night football game going on a couple of big screen TVs throughout the lawn. For all the Raider fans out there, I hope you do okay. Flash Pants 80s band, they kick ass, so you don't want to miss them. And of course, our cornhole tournament. Tuesday, so Tuesday morning, all breakout sessions will be here in this ballroom. We're changing the room around. And so there are 3 tracks, and they'll be back in here, not at the Pacific Promenade Room as we've had in the past. They will be here in the ballroom. Breakfast is out on the courtyard tomorrow at 7 to 8 a.m. And then 8 a.m. to 11, there's more breakout sessions here with a lot of great content. And, while we're all gathered here, we didn't have the opportunity to meet in the spring. Right now, Maria and team are planning a couple of fall regional summits in early November, Chicago, Philadelphia, Austin, and back here in Orange County. The format's a little different, more roundtable sessions, open networking discussion, RPAG technology. Really happy to be out on the road and on the road show and get in front of you guys. Great to bring your teams, your staff, your advisors, your internal staff, and get everyone immersed in RPAG. And we're going to be following that up again in 2022 with a bunch of great locations. And of course, times, dates, locations, all to be confirmed, but we're working on these right now. Again, thank you to our wonderful partners for making this happen. Please network with them, see them. They have great solutions, and we thank you for making this possible. And last but not least, thank you to the RPAG events team. What a beautiful and amazing conference. The attention to detail, the signage, the presentations are just out of this world. I'm always amazed by the work they do. So thank you to Veronica Lee, Bethany Lynn, Maria, Leah, Paula, Ashley, Megan, Chrissy, and the many dozen other RPAG team members who are here helping you all and giving you a great experience. So a round of applause to thank you to the team. Last but not least, thank you. Thank you for being here. This is the first event for many of us, back since 2019. I know I had a dry cleaning ticket still on this sport coat from 2019. I haven't had to wear one since. And so, but we thank you for taking time out of your lives, out of your business, away from your families, and coming here and immersing yourself in the business. And sometimes you need to work at your business and not just in it. And so we thank you, and we thank you for the attention. We thank you for your business and your partnership, and your membership of RPAG. We thank you for your energy here, and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you very much.